Hello, romance lovers! Today's story is called Living Again as a Maid. If you enjoy our videos, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss out on more exciting stories. A little boy cries, clinging tightly to a dark-haired woman. She is his mother and is trying in every way to calm the baby, while he, choking with tears, calls for his grandmother. The old woman lies peacefully, her eyes closed. She has been in a better world for a long time and in complete peace, probably enjoying her stay there. The rest of the people in the hall are called to say goodbye to the deceased. The crowd of people seemed to be in complete darkness. The sun was shining brightly outside, but their sadness darkened all possible colors around them. Some were crying, and from this, light sobs and the sounds of falling tears could be heard everywhere, which, like grief in its purest form, broke on the tiles. The little boy, finally breaking away, gently tugs at his mother's skirt, trying to attract her attention to his person. The only question that comes out of his mouth is that he thinks his grandmother has gone to heaven. He doesn't know if it's true, but anything is possible. The lady, trying not to cry in front of her son so as not to show herself weak, tries to swallow her sadness and smiles easily. Granny went to rest in a beautiful place, and it was destined to be. The girl is sure that the deceased will watch Minjun and the whole happy family from there. The boy keeps asking questions. The only thing that interests him at this age is goodies. The most interesting thing is whether there is something in that place that he would like to see. The lady smoothly squats down and gently hugs her son. She assures that there is everything that the old lady likes there. Uncontrollable tears flow down the face on their own. A hand falls on the baby's head, trying to subconsciously calm the child, knowing that it will be better this way. They should see Grandma off with smiles on their faces. That's what she would definitely want to see. Someone's hand falls on the bed and begins to shake the feather bed intensely. There is complete silence in the room, but everything ends very quickly. The owner of the female voice begins to say that it is time for her interlocutor to get up. The girl doesn't understand who is so desperately looking for her grandmother. Perhaps it is her granddaughter Sion, but in order to understand what is happening, she needs to open her eyes. Only the outline of an incomprehensible girl is visible, who continues to talk about an important day and about some viscount. Fully open eyes show reality. Right next to the bed stands a lady in a maid's uniform. An angry expression on her face makes it clear that something is already going wrong. Granny doesn't know this person at all, and this is clearly not her granddaughter. Not a second passes before the dark-haired girl switches from disgruntled remarks to a sharp scream, accusing the girl of sleeping like a log. This is indeed true, and sometimes it is difficult to wake her up, but the name Hammy, which is her name, is completely incomprehensible. It seems that the interlocutor is increasingly running out of patience. "How can you not get up for so long when you have to go to work?" she says. The irritation in her words does not subside, which is really worrying. The cute maid's uniform lay right in front of her, as if looking at the girl. She didn't understand how she was here. Something was definitely wrong here, and she needed to find out. They also mentioned some viscount, whom the girl didn't know. The main character was pulled out of her thoughts by her interlocutor, who had been talking about something all this time. Lifting the girl from the bed, she says that her task today is to clean the stairs. There shouldn't be a speck of dust, otherwise it will be worse. The dark-haired lady wanted to complain about her joints, which usually ached mercilessly when moving quickly, but it was not to be. She caught herself thinking that the pain was gone. Wonderful feelings, as if you were young again. It was as if Grandma was simply in a completely different body. Nothing felt real anymore. She only had to close her eyes and she wouldn't have to think about anything. But suddenly her own hands caught her attention. Absolutely tiny, chubby hands that couldn't be her own. The beauty with short, dark hair looked at the reflection. Black, large like a fawn's, eyes, a young face, and soft features proved once again that the girl was no longer in her body. Shock and confusion showed in the young lady's eyes. Horror came up, trying to take over her consciousness, and the girl put her hands to her face. This was simply impossible. This could not happen. And this was all unreal. For the second time that day, the girl is pulled out of her thoughts by the same maid. The screams seemed to drown out her ears, preventing her from thinking about anything else. She should move faster and finally get to work. No one will wait. Walking down the corridor, the heroine still didn't understand what was happening. She was now dressed in different clothes, working in someone's estate, and the most important thing was that she had changed. She didn't change her hairstyle or anything else because she had simply moved into another image. The stairs really do look very dirty. Dust literally lies in clumps on the steps. The girl can't imagine how the people living here could have let the castle get to such a state. As she approached the fork, the girl realized that no one had told her which staircase she should clean. There were several of them, and the prospect of cleaning the entire space did not please her at all. It is very difficult to find out the truth because there is no one nearby who could tell. It is even more difficult to simply decide without any advice. The girl is at a complete dead end. It's time to show off your skills. It's much easier to just remove both ladders instead of looking for someone and asking what exactly Hammy should do. The mop is quickly in his hands, and a mischievous smile appears on his mischievous face. The first in line was the carpet. A beautiful scarlet color that definitely attracts attention but collects too much dust and dirt. The girl carefully lifts the edge, squatting down. The red carpet is lifted, revealing a hidden surprise. A whole bunch of some fine dirt. The girl's face wrinkles. She clearly wanted to sneeze, but holding herself back was much more important. The heroine did not expect that everything would turn out this way. Next in line is the stairs. Water and detergents will help a lot, because in this case, it will be quick and easy to wash everything. The wet rag starts working intensively, wiping the steps. Once everything is finished, attention switches to the hall the girl is in. It seems she still has some free time, which means she can manage to clean up even here. You can see how everything around you slowly starts to literally shine with cleanliness. Hammy is actively working with a mop, humming some incoherent melody from her past life under her breath. A beautiful antique fireplace also requires a good cleaning. The item is decorated with gold and therefore requires proper care to avoid darkening. The structure turns out to be quite tall. It would be more convenient to stand on some stool or chair, but there is nothing suitable nearby. How inconvenient it is to be short. The cleaning is finally coming to an end. Putting her hand to her face as if wiping away sweat, the main character smiles happily. She is extremely pleased with herself and nothing can change that. The job is successfully done. Now you can finally relax. After the first hard day at work, you just want to sit down. So the beauty gently lowers herself onto the bed, softening the landing with her hand. Sitting on the bed in her room, the girl is only now thinking about everything that is happening. She didn't have time while cleaning, but now her thoughts are becoming more and more confused. It is completely unclear what happened. Hammy thought that her life supply had run out and she was no longer there. There is some truth to that, but if that is true, where is she now? The gaze involuntarily falls on the small hands. No one knows, and no one will answer the question of who this girl is and how all this happened. She will have to remain in this body for an indefinite period. Perhaps with time, the girl will again become old and decrepit, just as she was before today. Confusion is trying to cover her head, not giving her a chance to get out. But it is worth controlling your actions. Reality was vaguely blurred. Nothing seemed real, and so a bunch of questions popped into my head, as if from nowhere. My eyes involuntarily darted around the room, looking for something to watch, to distract myself. The good thing was that now the 89-year-old woman would finally have a chance to rest. Even with the cleaning and even with all the responsibilities, the girl was sure that she would be able to find positives. A beautiful castle sparkles in the sun. It is a bright, warm spring day outside. The roofs sparkle from how well they are polished. The house is hosting an invitation to guests. One young lady covers her mouth with her hand and showers compliments on how nice and clean it is. Her companion chimes in, saying that Winston shouldn't be modest because the house really has been beautifully restored. The red-haired Duke doesn't understand what's going on. This mansion is over 100 years old, and even the maids refuse to clean it. And then someone gives him such a compliment. It was quite unexpected. One of the girls continues the theme of the beauty of the house, but this time she is talking about the chandelier. The thing is so sparkling clean that it seems like a brand new chandelier, even if it is not. The man is just surprised and silent. One of the chief servants approaches the owner without delay. A greeting escapes his lips. No answer follows because the viscount cannot believe that he is in his own house. Approaching the elderly man, the Duke bows his head slightly and asks, expecting a clear answer. It turns out that this is all the work of the new maid who tried her best. The servant tells about a 15-year-old orphan girl he took in not long ago. Only a few days had passed, and she needed to get used to it. But today she showed a magnificent work. No one even expected this, and therefore there was no limit to the surprise. The Viscount smiles warmly, realizing that thanks to this girl, he managed to save face in front of the guests. The guy should thank this girl. All her efforts did not go unnoticed by the keen eye. Straightening his tie and hiding a smile, the Duke continued his conversation with his interlocutor. He asked that the lady be invited into his office as soon as the guests left. He had questions and good intentions, so it was worth waiting for. Hammy carefully entered the open office and stood in the middle of the room, as if frozen in a silent question. She was interested in what had happened, but in front of her she only saw a man she did not understand, who had called her to him. Unexpectedly for herself, she nevertheless decided to ask why they were looking for her. It seemed that the girl had just made a mistake, addressing the guy in exactly that tone. But fortunately, she had figured out what was going on pretty quickly. She shouldn't have behaved that way. The subordinate immediately runs up to the Viscount, trying to explain the situation. It seems that Hammy has not yet been taught basic etiquette, and that is why she started the conversation in the wrong place. The man only smiles weakly, understanding the situation. The girl should have been sent to the maid to learn manners, but that didn't happen. They decided that at least now it wasn't necessary, because the girl was here for something completely different. They called her to thank her. The young lady's eyes slowly widened. She didn't understand why she was being called a commoner, a servant, and an orphan. It was all too sudden. Hammy didn't know why she was here, why she had this particular fate, and she didn't know why she had this name, but none of that mattered. Even if she had ended up in any other body, she wouldn't have given up anything. This wasn't even the worst option. A young body full of vitality, together with an 89-year-old body full of common sense, seemed like a gift from fate. She was given the opportunity to live this life again the way she wanted. The girl was asked her name, asking if it was true that this was her name, to which she only nodded in agreement. I don't know if this name can really be used, but she had no choice. Putting his hand to his face, the guy continued his line. For everything the girl had done, he wanted to do something for her in return. It didn't matter what, because she could get whatever she wanted as a reward. Without even thinking for a minute, the maid quickly and incoherently mumbled something. She asked only for thread and fabric. The wish was strange and incomprehensible, but that was exactly what she wanted to receive in return. Silence fell over the room. The girl understood that if they owned such an estate, then they would certainly not begrudge her some fabric. They did not ask for many things at once. She was quite determined, burning with desire to receive the treasured things. Not quite understanding the young lady's motives, the Viscount nodded in agreement. He promised that he would tell the maid, and she would give everything separately, bringing it to the room. The only thing that bothered him was the uncertainty. Perhaps the girl wanted something else, but simply did not want to say. Joy instantly appeared on the beauty's face. She literally rejoiced at how she would be able to get everything she wanted. Lowering her voice, the girl says that this will be more than enough. The Duke decides to whisper. Addressing his servant, he talks about Hammy. She doesn't know life at all. She's only 15 years old. The order was to increase her salary so that she would have enough for everything. The man now addresses the girl in a normal tone, saying that the maid will provide her with a supply of fabric and thread. This was more of a statement of fact, but the girl only bowed as a sign of respect and expressed words of gratitude. The girl was really good at cleaning. It was one of her favorite things to do. She knew exactly how to do it, and so she was able to do all the necessary work without any difficulty. However, the best thing in this world is sewing. Once it was not only a hobby, but also a way to earn money. Literally everyone around liked her work, and it was logical, because they could not help but admire. Since childhood, the girl studied and her skills grew, so that she became a real craftswoman. This could not but please because now there was an opportunity to do everything that was possible. A set of beautiful, multicolored threads and dark silk fabric lay in plain sight. It seems the request was heard, and now the main character has everything she needs to be happy. The box with accessories quickly appeared on the girl's lap. Her eyes curiously examined the things offered to her, just what could help to do the first work. The first thing that came to mind was that curtains and tablecloths in mansions do not go well together. Perhaps this is something she should take on. It would be a great honor for her to redo the whole thing. The next second, several girls in nightgowns surrounded Hammy. Questions rained down from all sides, but the most important of them was that they wanted to know why the girl went to the viscount. It seemed that the interlocutors were completely incapable of waiting. Their eyes literally glowed with impatience. Everyone wanted to know what the main character was awarded in the Duke's office. All the girls, as one, believed that Hammy had asked not only for fabric and threads, but also for some other, more material thing. Listening to all this, the beauty only closed her eyes and smiled kindly. She had nothing to say, because all she had was threads. One of the maids fell into a reverie, thinking about what she might ask for if she had the opportunity. Her first idea was to say that she needed some fine lace. The other dark-haired maid was a true lady. She needed an elegant hat and preferably a beautiful dark sea green like all ladies. The blonde, closing her eyes, recalled her desire with pleasure. She really wanted to get gloves, so the girl would have asked for them. According to her, her hands did not look so nice without gloves. The beauties continued to argue about something while Hammy was lost in her thoughts. They were probably only 17 to 18 years old, and this was a great time for new desires, accomplishments, and everything else. One of the people present looked away, noticing something interesting. It wasn't clear what it was, but it seemed she finally understood. The beautiful embroidered dragon literally sparkled in its own light. Bright red color, massive teeth, and most importantly, all of this is embroidered from threads on fabric. The girls never stop admiring how talented Hammy is. The answer was a long-prepared line. The girl saw today that the tablecloths and curtains were not quite suitable, so the solution to replace them turned out to be the best one. It was done really simply wonderfully. A second later, the door swung open. The dark-haired girl was indignant. She thought it was unacceptable to scream at night. Her face showed rage, although there was almost no reason for it. The two women quickly began to bustle about. It was none other than Josephine, and if things went this way, she might complain about them. They all had to get back to bed quickly. The only one in bed was Hammy. The maid stood in the middle of the room in absolute silence. The girl, sitting on the bed, also did not dare to say a word, fearing the consequences, or rather, simply not knowing what to say. Josephine approached the bed and began her reproaches. She wondered why she didn't go to bed and turn off the light when she should have. The dark-haired girl just stared wide-eyed, without insisting, and quietly said that it was too early for her to go to bed. Anger suddenly seizes the interlocutor. She does not tolerate such an impudent attitude towards herself. The viscount thanked this girl, but this does not mean that she has the right to speak to her in such a tone and snap. A slight note of disdain was reflected on Hammy's face. She didn't want to argue and further spoil the relationship when it would have been easier to just go to bed. In her mind, she had long ago agreed on everything. Contempt is the most disgusting character trait. The girl smiled falsely, saying that the girl was smart, even though she didn't look like it. The most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. The scream filled the room again. The young lady still refused to calm down. She screamed about how Hammy had let her down and simply pretended that she was doing poorly, whereas when the viscount and his guests appeared, the girl decided to show off her abilities. The girl hung her head in embarrassment and irritation and just remained silent. She had nothing to say in response. The lady was an unbearable bitch, and it was impossible to shout her down. Literally out of nowhere, the head maid appeared. A strict lady with glasses, showing with her appearance how fair she was, even without words. The next line was addressed to none other than Josephine. She should go back to her room and not try to start another conflict out of nowhere. There was nothing else to do but do it. The figure disappears into the doorway. The lady sighs in relief, only saying that she doesn't understand what's wrong with her, because the girl always tries to ruin someone's mood. It wasn't worth paying attention to such people, considering that she'll get what she deserves later. The lady turns to Hammy. The lamps in the servants' quarters are quite low on oil, so she should definitely go to bed early before it runs out. You shouldn't sleep in the dark if you have phobias. The girl looked down at the floor. She didn't feel comfortable communicating with this woman because she didn't know her at all. It seemed that everything around was completely new and unknown, just like her. Laying in bed, Hammy couldn't fall asleep. She was wide awake, making it seem like she had been sleeping for the past week without a break. It was hard considering it was pitch black. The window attracts attention. Only one sash is open, and the moonlight stretches like a light trail across the room. The heroine's mind flashes with the thought of how beautiful the moon is. The solution comes immediately, and here are bare feet already on the wooden floor. The girl is not cold at all. She has one goal: For embroidery, even this lighting will be more than enough. Comfortably located on the windowsill, the beauty gets down to work. She has quite a lot to do before she feels tired and finally flies off to the kingdom of Morpheus. Morning came completely unnoticed. One of the main servants entered the hall and seemed to have lost the power of speech. The only thing he could utter was some incoherent muttering. The room was decorated with beautiful embroidery. All the tapestries, curtains, and even the carpets matched each other perfectly. The scarlet shades shone skillfully in combination with the blue walls. It seemed that a fairy had visited the castle that night. The curtains attracted the most attention. The handsome tigers and white flowers seemed to be looking straight at everyone around. The embroidery was truly wonderful. The ornaments and dragons with tigers look more like paintings. Everything is done in the best possible way, so there is nothing to find fault with, considering that no one asked for this to be done. Some rustling sounds from the curtains attract attention. The servant slowly raises his head in bewilderment. It turns out that the youth wakes up quite early, but no matter what, the girl carefully adjusts everything. The question of whether this is her work flies off her lips, and the answer is positive. According to her, her grandmother did not like it, and that is why she changed it. It sounds strange, but now this thing is not the most important thing. Sincere surprise and confusion are reflected on the man's face. It seemed to him or the girl was talking about some granny, and on the third day. The morning did not start as usual, and that's a fact. Realizing that they were looking at her strangely, Hammy stumbled and tried to quickly correct herself. She says that this is her doing, and everything that happened here today is not an accident or a fairy, but the young lady who is standing right here, right now. Turning away, the old man couldn't believe his ears. How could an ordinary maid replace all the curtains in the house overnight, and with a handmade masterpiece at that? It was simply beyond his comprehension why this had happened, even though it was nice. More comments reach the ears. Hammy finishes trying to fix the curtains and suddenly mentions the tablecloth. She managed to complete her work, but according to her, she is not sure that they will all be pleased. Another shock hits the servant. How can this be true? Both pairs of eyes look down, noticing something interesting. A beautiful embroidered dragon looks at people. Dark and light purple tones convey all the richness and high quality. The work is done successfully, and this cannot be undone. The man, without looking up, tries not to ask too many questions. The only one that interests him is whether it is true that the dragon is the work of a maid. Hammy tries to protest, folding her hands behind her back. It's not a big amount of work for her, so don't be so surprised. She doesn't ask for thanks because everything suits her, even in this form. In the maid's room, there were sounds of admiration and disbelief. The voices were surprised. They were being offered valuable things, which it was completely unclear how they would get to them. It was really surprising. The girls carefully try on the gifts. Beautiful lace, an exquisite hat, and lacy gloves, just what they needed. They had just talked about all these things just yesterday, and certainly did not expect to hold them in their hands today. Hammy watches all this with pride, putting her hand to her chest. Now you can always turn to her, and she will definitely do everything in her power to help and provide the desired things. The only thing that could go wrong is that the girl again called herself an old woman. The interlocutors break away from their conversations, not understanding what just happened. After all, the young lady couldn't just slip up like that. But everything ends quickly. Hammy corrects herself to her real name, trying to cover up all traces. The white gloves with the elaborately embroidered black roses fit the hands just perfectly. You can admire them for hours, no matter what. How did the maid manage to do all this herself? The friends can't get enough of the new things. Even the ladies of the court don't have anything like this, because it all looks even better than in the store, which is amazing. There is no limit to the joy. The answer is a smile that spreads across her face. The beauty can't help but smile, knowing that her work has been appreciated. For those who have a needle and thread, it's not that difficult. All you need is time and a little talent. The girl begins to tell about Lacey's hook, but is abruptly interrupted. There is only one question on everyone's mind. Can anyone really do this? Shock is reflected on the ladies' faces, who clearly do not believe her words, but perhaps, deep down, they want to believe. The people present immediately surrounded Hammy from all sides. They absolutely must learn to knit like her, and there was no way to avoid it. Pleas for instruction poured in on the girl, who seemed slightly confused. One of her friends even offered half her monthly salary in exchange for lessons. The young girls, without waiting for an answer, understand everything from the emotions of the interlocutor. Hugging the maid tightly, they cannot get enough of their little victory. Laughing, she only says that she should be let go. One of the girls almost jumped for joy. Without stopping asking Hammy if it was true that she agreed to teach them, they still couldn't tear themselves away from the lady. They just had to listen to all the instructions, but first they should know what to do. The dark-haired girl's dreams were quite logical, knowing how much she loves hats and everything connected with them. She really wants to make caps or hats and then wear them when she has a day off. The blonde wants to make something more sophisticated than the lace gloves she received as a gift. Maybe some leg warmers or a blouse to wear. The youngest has many more requests. The only task is to learn how to sew pretty dresses. It makes absolutely no difference whether they are made with lace or with some other element, because the main goal is to create a thing. It should be just right for parties. The maid was slightly taken aback by the amount of work and decided to put her friends in their place, saying that they should think about their first job. The problem is that beginners can't do something complicated, and that's why it's worth choosing something more accessible. The first step to be taken is to learn how to sew and sew on buttons. These are the very basics and should be easy to do. The answer is sorrowful words of agreement. The girls clearly did not expect such a turn of events, but for the sake of a dream, even this can be done. The training is to start tomorrow. A friend told me to bring a hoop so I can start working. It is not the most difficult thing and can be easily purchased at any sewing store. This is how the beginner's hand sewing classes started, opened in the maid's room. Everything is quite slow, but step by step they become more experienced. Every evening, sitting on the floor near the bed of teacher Hammy, the girls listen attentively to the instructions and try to do everything in the best possible way. Just a few days later, the young lady's lessons become even more popular. Sitting in her room in the evening, maids from other rooms approach her, knowing exactly why they came. Almost in whispers, acquaintances ask to join the team for sewing lessons. The dark-haired one is surrounded from all sides, interested in the conduct of the classes. Everyone in the area knows that her courses are very popular among people, and even experienced and adult maids want to get here. An extraordinary success. Silence enveloped the luxurious room. It seemed that it had crept into every corner, preventing one from penetrating. However, everything was broken by someone's words, which seemed to express discontent and surprise of the owner of the voice. A handsome, red-headed youth with beautiful blue eyes. He and no one else was the one asking questions here. This was Cassian Winston, the young master of this estate, who, it seemed, would soon rule here. A beautiful bedspread, and it would seem everything looks great here. But the discontent came from the grass embroidered on it. The boy continued to be indignant at the inequality, because his father's blanket had a dragon embroidered on it, and his sister's bed had a gerbera flower, while he got this incomprehensible creation. Anger was not a factor here, but the young man clearly did not want things to remain as they were. Only his blanket had grass on it, and it was almost humiliating because he was the master. He should have been given everything his family had. Approaching the fair-haired maid, Cassian begins to give unnecessary orders. The first thing he would like is for the blanket to be taken away and replaced with something else, more elegant. The girl tries to convince the young man to look at the thing because it is still beautiful, but it is not to be. The young man was simply confused by the indignation and such impudence, but still decided to stand up for himself. He really didn't like it, and therefore asked for everything to be redone in the form he needed. His thoughts quickly took a wrong turn, and his thoughts led him in the wrong direction. He should have thought of this right away, but it took him a while to come to this conclusion. The best solution was to call the maid who had started all this in the first place, the one who had done this work. The gentleman begins to think out loud. He promises that he will tell the girl how to make a new one, but this time in a way that will suit him. But what if he still doesn't like it? It seems that the answer to this question has also been prepared long ago. The lady couldn't get a word in, but she didn't need to. She knew perfectly well why young Cassian was doing all this. The guy clearly wanted to skip another lesson, which is why he said he wanted to have full control over the creation process, so he could have his say. Not even a minute had passed before the boy started shouting. Impatience was taking hold. That was why there was such a reaction. The maid, only looking down, did not understand why she was chosen to be scolded, because there was no fault here. Tears rolled down the young lady's cheeks. She didn't want the young man to miss the lesson, so the best solution was to start asking him. It shouldn't take much time, so the lesson could go on time, as usual, without any problems. Winston understands the situation he is in. He cannot get away from the work he has to do. Asking his interlocutor to stop crying, the guy says that he will simply give the maid instructions and that's it. Already hiding behind the door, the blonde promises that she will bring the lady here immediately. It won't take more than 10 minutes, so it's just worth waiting a little. The gentleman is lost in his thoughts. With a smile on his face, he notes that it won't be difficult for him to pull off his cunning plan. Namely, to give too many recommendations so that the girl won't be able to leave so quickly, thereby buying time. Besides, it was a great opportunity to get to know the new maid, but the guy didn't even know what to ask to draw on the blanket. Hammy is sitting quietly on her bed in the bedroom. Her friend suddenly bursts into the room, calling her name and saying that Cassian wants to see her. Confusion quickly appears on the beauty's face. The question freezes on the girl's lips because she really doesn't understand what's going on and why it's all happening. There's no answer, because the interlocutor says that they should hurry. Knowing how much the lady is thirsty for details, the promise to tell her on the way certainly sounds convincing. Trying to hurry, the girl suddenly remembers something and stops. Luckily, she had a good memory, so the words about needing fabric and thread fly out of her mouth. It was not worth forgetting such an important thing when heading to the owner. Hammy is now asking directly what is going on and why she is being called somewhere out of the blue. The blonde, carefully gathering the fabrics into an armful, is trying to simultaneously tell about the young gentleman. He did not like the embroidery, and now he wants to control the process. There is no need for long reflections. And having finished with the preparations, the interlocutor offers to tell what awaits her friend, noting that as a maid, she should not tell this at all, but it will be better this way. The first, most important thing, it is very difficult to communicate with a young man. The girls are already walking quickly down the corridor, hung with beautiful red curtains. The words continue to flow in a continuous stream. You should always say yes and never refuse because there may be many problems later. It is worth finding out what kind. The story continues. The owner is really stubborn and fickle, and this is one of the worst character traits. It will still happen, and she will understand when she gets a slap on the nose. The blonde's face darkened noticeably. Memories had carried her away somewhere far away. The next words were about the nanny. When she was alive, Cassian was completely different, but 2 years ago the woman suffered a serious illness, and after that she was unable to recover. The girl seemed ready to cry. This story brought sadness even to people who had never been there, and especially to all the other members of the family. The maid thought sadly that this nanny was like a mother to her too. After the viscountess passed away, this lady took the young man into her care and raised him as her own son. There was nothing more beautiful than her attitude towards the boy, but everything ended rather quickly and joylessly. However, in any case, Cassian is a man with a difficult and sad fate, even if the viscount tried to find a new nanny for his son, which was unsuccessful due to the stubbornness of the baby. It was very difficult to cope with the young man's temperament, and therefore, even if one of the nannies matched the description and experience, she did not stay for long. Smiling a little, Hammy commented, saying that they all just ran away from him. They stopped abruptly. The acquaintance hands over the necessary fabrics and threads into the hands of the dark-haired beauty. Not appreciating her humor, she only wrinkled her nose, saying that she was not asking for anything. You just need to be careful, and everything will be fine. The things ended up in the girl's hands when, as the interlocutor continued her story, she should have finished all her business with the blanket before the teacher arrived, so that he could conduct the lesson without any interruptions to the learning. The lady exhaled as if in relief, for it seemed that the girl understood everything. The only and final warning was that one should never mention the viscountess in the presence of young Cassian. The next second, the friend raises her hand and knocks on the door with a patterned ornament. There is no answer, but she already understands that she can come in, so the blonde, looking away, invites the main character in. A slight smile lit up the face of the acquaintance, and she decided to say her last words. She was going to go get ready for Professor Blake's arrival, so she only had 10 to 15 minutes before she had to leave quickly. The girl was left standing alone at this huge door. The maid had disappeared somewhere immediately after she finished her line. The only thing she had to do was enter the room. The room is decorated even more richly, and therefore seems very luxurious. High, almost panoramic windows, dark curtains that clearly lack beautiful embroidery, and beautiful but ordinary chandeliers. The sun falls at a beautiful angle, illuminating everything. A handsome guy sits on a sofa, putting his hand to his chin. Blue eyes thoughtfully look away, making it clear that the man is clearly somewhere far away in his thoughts, not emerging. The maid does not dare to break the silence and tear the master out of his thoughts. She continues to stand quietly at the door, her hands clasped together. She really should say something, since there is a lack of knowledge of where to begin. Confusion and even a little sadness are reflected on the face of the young heroine. In her thoughts, the girl is unable to believe that this baby is the young heir of the family. These thoughts do not give rest and are quite disturbing, but even stranger is the fact that the maid is strongly drawn to this boy. The young man is slightly distracted from his important thoughts. His eyes slowly run around the room and stop at the figure near the entrance. No one told him that the new maid is such a cutie. She is truly an extraordinary beauty. Perhaps if someone had told her about it earlier, everything would have been a little different, and then the young man would have shown himself in a better light. But the moment was lost. Black, shiny, short hair is so tempting, calling to gently run your hand through it. A cute face and graceful facial features. The girl can't help but attract. The smile, like the sun, illuminates everything around, allowing people to enjoy it to their heart's content. It is not clear how the beauty ended up here, but perhaps it was fate. Still very young, but with a very adult aura, giving the impression that this is not a 15-year-old person at all, stands in front of the person. The main character says nothing, but her face expresses confusion. She is not very pleased that they are looking at her like this and saying absolutely nothing, but she is not going to say anything. The owner, in turn, only opens his mouth, freezing in a silent sound. The girl is offered to sit down on the sofa, and her eyes automatically switch to the gray thing standing right in front of her. It's class time now, so why the offer to sit and talk about something? The young lady still doesn't dare to say anything, but a stroke of genius comes to mind. If anything, she can always come up with some excuse to leave right before class starts, and then everything will be fine. Already sitting on the sofa, the lady tried to understand Cassian's words and understand what he really wanted. The boy wanted her to embroider the blanket again with a luxurious, but at the same time beautiful and attractive pattern in a minimalist style, so that there would not be too much unnecessary. The embroidery had to be special and impressive, but at the same time not too flashy. The guy and his requests were very difficult to understand, but Hammy continued to listen silently, trying not to miss anything. He wanted the same size, but a minute later the young man changed his mind, wanting the size to be slightly smaller than the previous one. According to him, it would look much simpler, more elegant and beautiful, so it would be worth hurrying up with the work. Without listening to anything else, the sweet person unfolded the fabric, where threads of different colors for every taste and wish were hidden, saying that now it was time to think about something. In her head, a picture of how it should look had definitely appeared. The thread was in the needle, and the girl immediately, without losing a second, began to work. With deft movements, something resembling the outlines of a future work of art began to appear on the bedspread, showing and confirming once again how talented the heroine was. Blue and green colors sparkled on the fabric. It was difficult to understand what exactly was depicted, so the guy wanted to ask something, but hesitated, thinking that he should just continue to quietly watch the maid work. A slight confusion took hold of every part of the body. The viscount wanted everything to turn out as beautifully as possible, so that everyone around would literally envy him, and hope remained, making it clear that this is how it would be. Cassian is tired of sitting, apparently hoping that he can somehow control the work better, and so the boy carefully gets up from his chair, heading to the girl's place opposite him. The finger slides along the fabric, stopping somewhere near the white tiger's eye. The needle is literally a centimeter away from the location of his hand, which clearly does not frighten the guy at all. The girl's hand came closer with the speed of light. The clap seemed to deafen everyone in the room, not giving even a single chance to maintain proper silence. The woman screamed, calling the guy a boy. The young man, in turn, is very surprised. It was not clear to him why they had abruptly driven him away, and now they were trying to put him in his place, despite the fact that he was the master of the situation. The reddened hand hurt just a little from everything that had happened. Hammy only exhaled, saying that he just needed to be a little more careful, because there was a needle here. It was always quite easy to get hurt and end up with a lot of pain. It was worth just waiting a little. The grandmother inside the girl perked up, and this time everything was completely different. The lecture on safety purposes was making itself felt, and so the conversation turned to the fact that if the young gentleman got hurt, there was nothing she could do about it. The boy looked down at the floor and didn't understand why he was being scolded. In his opinion, it was just a small prick that wouldn't do any harm. All his thoughts poured out into words, which was a huge mistake. The girl started the topic of illnesses and how some of them still have no cure, and half of them can be obtained through a needle prick, which should never be done under any circumstances. The image of a grandmother immediately pops into my head, who also scolded her grandchildren for all sorts of minor injuries, like burns or something else. The boy looked down at the floor, not understanding what else he could say. The young lady was right about everything, but a strange feeling still hung in the air. He had not expected such behavior. The topic quickly changed, and the conversation turned again to the drawing on the blanket. The girl said that she had finally finished, and the boy had to choose one of the proposed painting subjects, one of which was a dragon, another a turtle, and a third even more interesting, a tiger. Interest showed on his face, but the answer was not long in coming. A hand reached for the bedspread, and the index finger pointed to one of the works of art. A white tiger would look very nice on the bed. Giggling a little, the dark-haired girl notices a small but interesting detail. It seems that the boy clearly loves tigers, and they are to his liking. This was noticeable even from afar, because it was difficult not to understand why this was happening. The only question manages to fly off the young man's lips. He does not understand why the maid allows herself to communicate with him so informally, while everyone else, literally in horror, tries to avoid unnecessary topics of conversation and is afraid to talk about anything. Confusion, that's all. The only dominant emotion on his face at the moment. Only recently has Hammy allowed himself to talk to the gentleman in such a tone as if they had already become friends. Disappointment flashed across the young lady's face. It seemed she wanted everything to remain as before, but she had not expected it to turn out exactly this way. She only had enough strength to mumble something incoherently. It turned out that she was not allowed, but for some reason she decided that everything impossible was possible. Seeing all the emotions on the face of the interlocutor, the red-headed man feels like the master of the situation. Words, without any hesitation, are rebuilt into sentences, trying to convey only one correct information. If the guy allows, then everything will be possible. The young man folds his hands on his knees and looks away conspiratorially. He had one idea to carry out his plan, so he talks about the condition he has for the girl to continue to address him in this form. The young people had different social statuses, and therefore Cassian could not simply give his consent without any reason. Hemi understands that this is true, but fear deliberately creeps up on all sides. The conversation is suddenly interrupted. The red-headed man turns his attention to the door and notices something. It seems that Teacher Blake has already arrived, which means that there is no time to waste. Hearing the mention of the lesson, Hammy realized that she was late and did not follow her friend's advice. Better late than never, so the brunette quickly got up from her chair. The decision to leave could not cause a negative reaction. Already heading for the exit, the owner's voice stops him. The young man, indignant at such behavior, says that he has not yet finished what he called the girl for, and therefore she should sit back down, even if she did not really want to. The main character was clearly not pleased with such treatment, considering that her promise was now under threat, but she was not going to argue. Protests about the boy having a lesson soon had long since stopped working. The door to the room slowly opens. A male voice says goodbye to Julia, saying that he can handle everything else even if it will be quite difficult. Then the guy turns to the gentleman, saying that he is entering. A handsome man with blonde hair and green eyes, his gaze thoughtlessly scanning the room, taking in everyone present. Words could not describe how beautiful he was. His exquisite clothes seemed to add a bit of charm. The girl felt, to put it mildly, uncomfortable under the gaze of these two people who were in the same room with her. She wanted to say that she was very sorry, but the teacher was the first. The man apologizes for entering without knowing that the owner already had a guest. Cassian puts his hand to his chin in a mock gesture, commenting on the teacher's terrible manners, who should now leave as quickly as he came in. It would seem that everything is going according to plan, but the man is a tough nut to crack. It is now class time, so this action was entirely justified. The young man continued to sneer, talking about how he would like the teacher to learn how to burst into all the rooms without knocking. but the girl cut him off, getting up from the sofa. Her angry tone made it clear that she was clearly not herself, because you can't talk like that to a teacher to whom you should, on the contrary, try to listen. The kid rolled his eyes, not fully understanding what had just happened, because this maid had once again put him in his place, shaming him in front of the teacher, which he didn't like at all. Mr. Blake stood in mute silence, questions written on his face. He couldn't believe that a stranger would stand up for him under such circumstances, even if she shouldn't have. Hammy did not want to stop for a second, continuing to chatter. The young boy should respect the choice of his parents in the person of the teacher, because they only want the best, and he should also study well and diligently for a great future. The boy was destined to become a great man, and no one dared to change that. Realizing that she had clearly said too much, the girl quickly left the room, throwing only a few additional words in farewell. The conclusion was one: it was worth studying hard, and then everything would be just fine, no matter what. The door slammed shut on the other side, leaving the two people in complete silence, completely alone in the room. Neither of them fully comprehended everything that had just happened, or why this particular maid had behaved this way. The evening came completely unnoticed, lowering its darkness onto the city. The guy lies in bed and looks thoughtfully at the ceiling. Thoughts about Hammy are still swirling, trying to create at least something intelligible, something like an answer to all his questions. The red-headed man couldn't stand it any longer, so he jumped up and sat up on his bed. The girl had dared to hit him on the arm to embarrass him in front of the teacher, and all of this was absolutely ridiculous. She was just a maid's apprentice, but because of her skill with the needle, she seemed to consider herself one of the aristocracy. Clenching his fist in indignation, Cassian still couldn't understand what was happening to him now. He had never felt such strange anger towards anyone before. Informal speech irritated him, perhaps, the most. The gaze fell on the bedspread with beautiful tigers. It should be said that it did not turn out very well, so the lady would have to redo it several times, but most likely she would have done it better and better each time. Where did the stranger learn to sew so skillfully? There was no more strength to look at the animal. The boy lay back down in bed, putting his cheek to the pillow, continuing to think about none other than the maid. How did she manage to be such a beautiful and pleasant person in spite of all this? He didn't want to admit it to himself, but the lady was really very beautiful. All her facial features were very graceful, and her kind eyes seemed to beckon you to come up and hug her. In an attempt to forget, removing the image from his head, the guy closed his eyes, forgetting about everything in the world. Not a minute passes before Cassian rolls over onto his stomach, still wailing. You can't be so charming without a reason. No one chooses their appearance, but this person seemed to have chosen and created the best set. Burying himself in a soft, silky pillow, the young viscount is still lost in his thoughts. This sweet person did not want to leave his mind at all, which was a little annoying, as it prevented him from sleeping. It was difficult to do anything about it. The morning began in a very unusual way. The gardener in uniform stood under the scorching sun and, holding scissors in his hands, prepared to continue his work. It was worth cutting off all the unnecessary branches and leaves before everything became overgrown and worse. Attention was still drawn. The boy did not want anyone to ask unnecessary questions, but living in a castle, it is impossible to avoid. So this time, everything happened exactly the same. The old man came closer to the boy and was interrupted as soon as he opened his mouth. The old man didn't understand what the joke was about all this, so he silently looked away, casting down his gaze. The best idea was to simply not disturb the young gentleman so that he wouldn't get mad. The silence did not last long, because questions began to come out on their own. The first and most important was what had brought the guy here this early in the morning, when, like at this time, he was usually asleep and dreaming his 10th dream. A flashback occurred in his head. Over the previous few hours, the young man had managed to visit several places almost simultaneously, namely the stable, the chicken coop, and even the geese. There was no reason to be proud here, nor could there be. He didn't want to go into details, so he quickly changed the subject and asked where he could find insects. Perhaps he should have said what kind of creature he was looking for, but that answer didn't follow. Taking full advantage of the kindness and being the master of the situation, Cassian hinted that it would be nice to find big ones, not small ones. The gardener's eyes widened, and the man himself wondered in bewilderment where the guy was going to use the animals. The redhead suddenly thinks about something, but only for a second, And the next moment, he is already returning to reality, noting that he still has one use for the unfortunate insects. His feet are wearing stylish and probably expensive shoes, and they step over the threshold. The sneakers that were good for digging in the mud disappeared as soon as the young man got back from the yard to the estate. While searching for the maid, they finally succeeded. The beauty was sitting on her bed in the maid's room, quietly doing something, which was good news, since it hadn't taken more than 10 minutes. All that was left was to gather up the courage and come closer. The dark bag with the secret contents was placed right next to the girl. The boy noted that she should have unpacked it in his presence and that it was a gift from the heart. A slight surprise lit up the face of the interlocutor. Dark eyes opened wide, staring at the man standing in front of her and still not believing what was said. The girl quietly asked again if it was really intended for her. Without giving her a single chance to get another word in, Cassian asked her to shut up and finally open his homemade package, assuring her that something incredibly wonderful was waiting for her there. Hammy's spontaneous tone was still a little surprising, but there was no time to pay attention to it. Relaxing and deciding not to worry about all the existing circumstances, the young lady, tilting her head to the side, quietly agreed to open the gift, leaving no chance for reflection for herself. Right from the carefully wrapped package, cute silkworm caterpillars were looking at the girl. How could someone come up with such a strange idea for a gift? It was hard to believe that all this was the work of a 16-year-old boy. The praise was directed towards the young man. The maid remarked that the insects were not so bad, because the young man had managed to catch so many of the huge and nimble creatures. Cassian only nodded in response, thinking that the gift would not be suitable, but froze at the words he heard. Reaching her hand towards the boy's head, Hammy ran her fingers through his hair, gently ruffling his head, calling the boy a good child, which couldn't help but throw her into a stupor. He had given her a gift, and that was more than enough, but it wasn't all that clear-cut. Smiling, as if confirming her words, the dark-haired beauty closes her eyes, talking about how good the boy is. At this moment, she doesn't care about anything at all, because exactly what she needed has already happened and brought her great pleasure. Everything continued with the girl taking pity on the caterpillars, recommending that they be released into the wild, rather than kept in a narrow and uncomfortable pocket. Redhead wanted to say something in response, but was interrupted again and called to action. The gentle taps on his pocket made it clear that he had to hurry before his patience ran out. Insects couldn't wait, even if it all sounded terribly ridiculous. The bundle that was handed back lies in the hands of the young man, while the maid continues to speak quietly to him. It would be worthwhile to begin right now, but the boy could not move from his place. The girl promises that she will continue embroidering while he has time to go there and back so she can wait for him. Still with the same thoughtful face, but already in the garden, Cassian tried to come up with a clear explanation for the girl's behavior. No one had ever dared to address him in such a way before, and now his nastiness was met with praise, which the young man rarely received anyway. The caterpillars quickly crawl along the asphalt, trying to escape into some abyss of nearby bushes, which is, of course, correct, but not so much that it can be done. Everything that happened no longer seems real. Thoughts completely envelop the young man, although he, in turn, without any intentions, tries to understand what is wrong here. He wanted to do another dirty trick, but everything turned out completely differently than he expected, and all because of this maid. Each time, Cassian managed to come up with new ideas to slip something to the girl. However, the reaction was always quite surprising. The girl folded her arms over her chest, exclaiming touchingly, seeing the spider. The next time the boy tried much better, bringing with him a frog, which immediately ended up on Hammy's finger, while the young man himself, sitting in the bushes, was literally ready to burst into tears. The only similarity was the ending of each of these pranks. The girl thanked the young man and then asked him to release the poor insects from the bag, because she did not like it at all. The boy, not understanding what he should do in order to finally get a negative or positive reaction, always remained confused after the procedures were completed. The sticks and bags remained unused. After a while of such communication and such gifts, the guy literally followed the girl around, listening to her advice and everything she told him. As a result, rumors began to spread throughout the castle, and all the servants whispered incessantly. The young lady communicated with the young gentleman so informally and also without any fear, as if he were her ward or an old friend who wanted to earn attention. Hammy had always been very responsible, and it showed very strongly. Cassian was tired quite often, And even now, starting to whine, he suggests giving the work to someone else and going for a walk instead, at least in the garden. It didn't take long for the refusal to come. One of the main servants could not understand what the problem was and why the master suddenly decided to change so much. Not understanding why he liked the new maid so much, the questions became even more numerous. However, Vincent only smiled, seeing in the girl a new friend for his son. The girl always feels sorry for the young viscount. The boy never got to know the love of a mother or a nanny, and so it turned out that the main character took on these roles, as well as the role of her best friend. The season changed. The hot summer crept up on us unnoticed, preparing no one for its arrival. It was a good time of year, and a lot had happened. The friends succeeded in embroidery and thanked their savior madly often. Literally every time, as soon as one of them embroidered something new, everyone immediately ran to show it and rejoice. There were many thanks from ordinary servants, although, oddly enough, it did not seem to Hammy that she had done anything special. But this was not the case. The girl often helped the younger master in everything. Even such simple things brought maximum pleasure. Wherever the young lady went, she was showered with praise and gratitude, and strangely enough, during this time, she even succeeded in her business. Boredom seemed to be taking hold of the young viscount's entire body, and he still had to read the history of the foundation of the state. The most terrible occupation, in his opinion, was reading. The boy sat in his chair, frowning, and continued to complain about everything. Sometimes it seemed as if he disliked all these lessons so much that one day he would simply run away without telling anyone. The girl, closing her eyes, tried to express her point of view. If you read a lot of books, you will become an outstanding and successful person, and it is really worth it if you think about it. Looking away, various thoughts creep into the guy's head, but he knows one thing for sure. It won't help him. According to him, the young man is already an outstanding person, so he doesn't need books. The conclusion was that Cassian had no intention of opening the book. Sadness enveloped Hammy, and she revealed that she had dreamed of learning to read all her life. The red-headed man, turning his head, wanted to laugh but held back. It seemed completely strange to him to want to learn about books. The girl admits that this is true because, in fact, she does not know how to read at all. The book fell out of the young man's hands with a characteristic noise and hit his knee. He couldn't believe that someone like his interlocutor couldn't do such a simple thing. Deciding not to think about it anymore, the boy continues asking leading questions, trying to find out the most accurate information. It turns out to be true, and the girlfriend can't read a word. This was perhaps one of the most unexpected news or discoveries in recent times. For some reason, the young man always thought that the girl could do literally everything, but it turns out that this list included absolutely everything except the alphabet. If a person is simple, then he does not always have to read. And on top of all this, Hammy is still very young, so everything is ahead. The words did not sound very convincing, and the eyes nervously darted around the room, not inspiring any confidence. Although Cassian was right. Deciding that words were of no use, the boy began to try to talk about all the virtues of his girlfriend. There were really a lot of them. It seemed to the guy that it was all simply amazing and deserved some praise. The girl sits with her eyes downcast, and it seems that she is about to cry. The young master reproaches himself for being capricious, for not wanting to read, or simply complaining about how hard the life of an aristocrat is in front of an illiterate commoner. This was absolutely unacceptable. But what will be, will be. Without thinking twice, the red-headed man jumps up from his chair as a brilliant idea has come to him. The best option was to teach the young lady to read, and that is exactly what he proposes to do. Hammy doesn't understand what just happened, and whether this offer actually came from the mouth of this boy. She really wanted to learn, but she didn't know anything, just like she didn't know where to start. Patting the spot on the sofa next to him, the young man beckons his interlocutor, inviting her to change her position. Such kindness out of nowhere cannot be strange, because he wanted to help. Thoughtfulness is reflected on the young woman's face. It seems that in her head she is weighing all the pros and cons, and it is difficult to understand which category is winning. Apparently, she didn't have to think long, because in a moment the maid was sitting right next to the young viscount, because she was told to do so. The guy was clearly a little nervous next to her, which was noticeable even to the naked eye. The girl understands deep down that these lessons will most likely not end well. In this world, for such a commoner, the inability to read is very natural and occurs in literally every second person. The lady had lived an unenviable life all her life. She always wanted something more, but it was all too difficult to implement in real life. Her past life personified her as an illiterate person. The inability to do basic things and the lack of basic skills often ate away at Grandma from the inside. It seemed like a vicious circle with no way out, but eventually the first step was taken. The woman made up her mind and one day went to a school for old people. The teacher divided people into groups and taught groups of 5 people reading, writing, and other important things in education. Everything was going well, but over time, my eyesight began to deteriorate, and due to overwork, all the work was done hastily. As a result, the material was not absorbed as it should have been, and all progress came to naught. The old lady's wishes are a happy, complete family, the health of her loved ones, and learning to read. It's quite difficult to fulfill everything at once, unless you're 25 and still very young and green. The girl wanted to learn to read books and write without anyone's help, and even with beautiful handwriting, and that's how it was supposed to be. But in the end, something went wrong. Just by turning in the wrong direction, something happened. It was completely unexpected, because for such an ignoramus like her, the road leading to peace and the path of enlightenment and dreams just opens up. The kid appeared like seaweed from nowhere. The girl didn't expect him to take on her training. The pen scribbles crookedly on the paper, making terrible creaking sounds. Everything will be really difficult. The guy takes some incomprehensible piece of paper from his hand, carefully straightening it out, not trying to show anything. However, with the next words, he suggests voicing the alphabet one letter at a time, so that it would be convenient for the girl to repeat after him. Hammy was still distracted, deep in her thoughts, but a voice interrupted her. The remark that she was doing something incomprehensible was sternly voiced, and then the young master began to slowly read the letters, starting with A and B. The lady did a great job, and so the red-haired man, praising her, decides to move on through the alphabet, offering to continue with B and G. It is clearly not hard for him to do this, and that is why he wants to manage to at least go through the alphabet. Hammy seemed very interested in the process. The letters were quite easy, so they moved further along the rows as they wanted to. The index finger slid carefully along the smooth surface of the sheet, pointing to the hieroglyphs needed to be read. It was all really difficult, but quite possible and doable, even if it looked scary at first. The girl couldn't believe that at such an age it was possible to learn something new. It was always wonderful to learn, but sometimes everything didn't go as desired, and only in another life can you do the impossible. The young master continues to name the letters in turn, which should be continued to be read in order. The eyes themselves constantly try to look at the girl sitting next to him, which cannot help but distract from the lesson. Violet eyes are focused on the parchment, and lips are moving slowly, trying to pronounce letters, at least as indistinct sounds. It really makes me smile a little, but at the same time, it's cute how she tries. As she continues reading, the guy simultaneously says that very soon she will be able to apply all her skills in practice. Perhaps it will be reading, or maybe writing right away, which will become even more literate over time. After some time, the maid suddenly remembered that it was dinner time. They should have stopped there, because no matter how important studying was, eating on schedule. It worked especially after a long and exhausting job. A moment later, Cassian interrupted her mid-sentence. He asked for the food to be delivered to the room so that they wouldn't have to stop or go anywhere. Hammy was clearly not happy with this arrangement. She glared at the young man, beginning her tirade about how important it was to eat with family at the same table, and that if he didn't follow basic etiquette, then everything would be bad. The guy had no choice but to sigh in defeat and get up from his seat. The boy slowly made his way to the door. He really didn't want to stop his lesson for food or anything, since it was nice to be in such company. But he really didn't have a choice. The hand reached for the black door handle and was about to open the lock, but the words of gratitude made the limb freeze. The young man was really pleased with such an attitude towards himself, especially from a specific person like this girl. He wanted to scream with joy like a little child, but the only answer was awkwardness and words about how he did nothing special. Ignoring his remark, Hammy smiled, saying that for her today was something special and completely new. One of the best lessons in her life, and it will not be possible to change it. The young man had absolutely no idea what to say. The only right decision was to remain silent and, opening the handle, walk away. Walking down the corridor accompanied by Josephine, the boy still could not understand what had just happened. He could not believe that he had heard words of gratitude. He only taught the girl a little bit of letters, but according to her, she liked it too much. It was unexpected, but at the same time, it couldn't help but make him happy, because it was his first lesson in his life, which he conducted himself, without anyone's help. A picture of a beauty pops into his memories out of nowhere. The way her eyes ran over the lines, the way she tried to read and tried her best to make sure he liked everything. The boy was very, very happy with this arrangement, but it also meant that he should teach her something else so that she would not want to leave. The thought process was no longer able to stop. It was necessary to find some books for easy reading, but the most difficult question arose, and that was where to get such books to continue studying. A toothy smile announced the approaching success. For some reason, many useful things came to mind. It was worth trying to start with the fairy tales that the young man read in childhood, and for now, that would be enough. It was tiring, but everything could be lived through. The room of the managing maid, with closed shutters, was lit up with loud conversations and incessant laughter on the eve of sleep, which was not worth doing. Gossip is one of the maid's favorite pastimes. The blonde with the dreamy look was talking about how she had just managed to greet Colin, to which she had only heard a ton of admiration in response. Her friends said that they had seen the boy tying her shoelaces. It was unclear where they had come from and since when they had been so close, but it was quite interesting. Quite often, when hiring, the owner forbids any relationships at work, already knowing in advance how it can end, because sometimes people just fall in love with each other. This rule has befallen the castle. The girl, putting her index finger to her lips, says that it is better to be quieter so that no one hears, even if the interlocutor assures that no one will come here. Next on the agenda is Josephine, the eternally angry and indignant girl who gives everyone orders. It would seem that her character let everyone down, and right after the rumor about how she got together with Colin, another rumor started about how they broke up. The young lady merely waved her hand in response to all this, declaring that the maid was not at all interested in that servant. On that vacation, she left the city limits and met another who caught her eye, and she fell irrevocably in love with him. The girl met some hooligan in an alley, and he saved her, thus winning the heart of the young beauty. This rumor spread even faster than all the previous ones, without any reason. One of the girls with the mini haircut says that it looks more like some kind of romantic comedy. And perhaps she is not so far from the truth, since the story is really complicated. Who was this stranger? The man said nothing, not even his name, and disappeared under the moonlight. The description had long been known to everyone because the man was incredibly handsome. Black hair and strong shoulders, as well as powerful arm muscles. His clothes were quite neat, and according to Josephine, he emanated a pleasant aroma. A little sadness came over the girls and the whole room, too. Apparently, a very attractive man had crossed her path, since she was so lucky. Not everyone gets such a chance, and it was a pity that the young man simply disappeared. The conversation no longer wanted to be sad, and so one of the maids started talking about her type of men. Blondes are the best in the world, as are blue eyes, which literally make you fall in love with them more and more every time you look into them. Admiration and a certain love are reflected on the face and in gestures. A blonde and a brunette get into an argument. One of the ladies says that there is nothing special about guys, while the other tries to contradict them by saying how beautiful they are. The argument flares up out of nowhere, so the best solution is to calm the two divas down. One of the older maids is there, gently spreading her hands and trying to hush up the conflict before it could escalate into something more complicated and bad. A brilliant idea comes to her mind, which will surely please everyone present. The questions fall on Hammy. Now she has to answer, and she can't get out of it. Innocence is reflected on the girl's face, but all the ladies wanted to know what her ideal is. In a split second, the young beauties are already sitting on the floor around the bed where the girl is. She is still very young, but this does not mean that she does not have an ideal, so it is worth checking. In the case of this maid, she may be with a very attractive man because any man would propose to her, having learned all her talents. Doubts creep into her head. The young master has been following the maid everywhere for weeks now and always shares all the new news with her, so anything could happen, but no such luck. Another maid interrupts, saying that this can't be. Both of them suddenly fall silent, as if remembering that the subject of discussion is still in the same room with them, and they certainly shouldn't continue in the same spirit as before. One of the girls stutters, unable to imagine how Cassian would dare to look down on such a beautiful person. He would not have the courage because he still needs to grow and grow to perform such an act. There is no way a young man could like a girl. It would be a lie even if it happened. The girls continued their reflection, saying that even if Cassian proposed, they should fight for him to the end. The brunette, still holding the paper in her hands, tried not to pay attention to anything. Conversations about nothing were not her element, but at the moment they were the only ones surrounding the girl. While those in the room continued to discuss the interesting topic of what their children would look like, Hami was not listening to them. She was learning the alphabet, and so she was completely immersed in her thoughts. One of the girls noted that, no matter what anyone said, the young master was very attractive. His appearance was truly extraordinary beauty, and all the friends agreed that they had never met anyone more beautiful. Especially considering that he had a special aura that was clearly different from ordinary people. The maid with the pixie cut keeps asking herself questions. It's really interesting what the guy's future will be like and how everything will turn out. But the character spoils the whole thing again. Not everyone can handle the character, and you have to be like grandma to do it. The conversation is interrupted by a knock on the door, which seems quite unexpected. Silence falls like a wave on the room. All three beauties freeze, looking at the door. Only everything that was happening pulled the girl out of her thoughts. The alphabet cramming was unceremoniously interrupted, and so her eyes stared somewhere to the side, trying to understand what was happening. Hearing the young lady's voice, the woman behind the door quickly realized who she was talking to. And already switching to requests, she says that there was a pesky fortune teller outside. It would be nice if someone gave her some food so that she would finally leave. Apparently, the head maid was busy with something very important, so the maids had no choice. They had to follow the instructions to avoid being thrown out of here. The main character did not understand what the problem was and what was going on. It was unclear what fortune teller was being talked about and what she was. But this was a new task with the help of which all this had to be found out. Sighs were heard from all sides. The blonde says that this is not something they should talk about, but if you think about it, then coming to such a small family of viscounts is a bit of a cruel punishment. Hami didn't understand what was being discussed, and that's why it was difficult to decide what exactly she should say and what her reaction should be. The best solution was to just remain silent, wide-eyed, silent. News began to spread throughout the town not so long ago, and all of them, as one, about this fortune teller. Because of spending time with the young gentleman, the girl completely fell out of life and did not know what it was connected with. It turns out that there are rumors that a fortune teller goes to every aristocratic family in search of the future wife of the crown prince. It seems like one of the most disappointing ideas for earning money for food, but it is true, because she has one goal: to let you hear something good and grab a piece of food. At first, the girl was received with open arms and kindly treated. But when she was repeated, they began to treat her much more easily, not pitying her. The main character's face only grew sadder. She always feels sorry for someone who has to beg for food, and this time was no exception. A slippery smile spreads across the brunette's face. She is disgusted by all swindlers, and because of them, the honor of normal people is hurt. It seems that nothing is being done at all in the castle of magicians, because the liar has not yet been caught, as they should have done. The girls were all around her again. Hami, giving her directions. She was the one who would have to face that imposter today. The whole operation was pretty safe, because if you didn't believe a single word that was said, everything would be fine. The girl goes into the kitchen and is greeted by a cheerful greeting from a red-haired man. Offering her something to eat, he simultaneously asks why she came and if there was a reason for it. This kind soul is the castle's cook, and right now she is offered the cookies that are left. The main character smiles tenderly. She always liked this man from the very first day of her stay in this place. He really got it from the young master because of his bad character. But since the young lady appeared in the estate, Cassian moderated his ardor, which served as a huge gratitude from his friend. The young man had obviously remembered something, and was therefore quickly bustling about in the kitchen. It was rather strange, but it was only worth waiting a couple of minutes, and this terrible secret could be revealed. The next second, a bowl of custard materializes in front of the girl. She loved cakes and muffins with this filling, which the man was well aware of. It is a cream created especially for baking, and it is definitely worth trying without any discussion. As he hands the dishes over to the maid, red-haired continues to smile, saying that if anything, he is always ready to give more so that they can all eat together and enjoy themselves. Joy knew no bounds. These small gestures of attention always seemed insanely sweet and charming. Words of gratitude were already like an obligation, after which you could ask for something more important. The girl also needed milk and bread. Nodding in response, agreeing with the request, the hero asks if there is anything else needed. Without thinking twice, the girl asks for ham and cheese if possible. Such a small thing could make her happy. Turning around and going to the other side of the kitchen, the man picked up the basket and began to carefully put all the necessary things. The first in line was bread, and bread is the most important. The question about fruit was very necessary since Hami almost forgot why she came. The assumption sounds convincing enough to put it into action. The basket is already full of baked goods and other food. Just what you need. The guy asks who she is going on a picnic with, to which the answer is not what one would like to hear, but what they were obliged to do. The food was intended for the fortune teller herself. In just a moment, 2 baskets full of food appeared in the hands of the fragile girl. A quick thank you made it clear that she had been pleased, but in her mind it seemed that she had been given too much. The sun shone brightly outside the window, illuminating the estate. The white columns looked quite massive and majestic compared to the people. The main character carefully opens the door to the street, still holding tightly the baskets with all sorts of food. It was not worth attracting too much attention, but she urgently needed to find that very fortune teller, and no one explained to her how to do this. A slight confusion appeared on Hami's face, letting her know that her goal had been achieved. Someone was standing very close, right in front of the girl. The stranger was wrapped in a black cloak with a beautiful golden ornament. Her face was not visible, just like other parts of her body. Only secrecy, which wafted from a kilometer away. Noticing the details of her clothes, the heroine decided to ask at least one question. The girl was dressed too tightly, and the interesting thing was, how come she wasn't sweating yet? Perhaps she was having a hard time breathing, which is why she was silent. A second later, a jug of milk appears in the hand. The recommendation was to drink it quickly. It would certainly help with thirst and prevent the sun effect. It seemed as if the fortune teller had absolutely no strength or emotion. When she said thank you, she almost staggered, making it clear that the clothes were indeed not quite suitable. The stranger, head bowed, greedily drinks the offered drink. Thirst has taken over her entire body, forcing the maid sitting next to her to think about how long they had to wander. Tearing himself away from the jug, the man praises the food of this house, because it is really prepared very skillfully and, on top of all this, with soul put into it. More words of gratitude fly from the lips, on top of all this, making it clear that all this time in front of the girl was not a lady, but a very young man. Smiling, the maid assures that everything is fine and there is still plenty to choose from, so there is no point in rushing. The food needs time to digest, so the only correct recommendation is to eat very slowly. Patting her interlocutor on the shoulder, as if expressing a kind gesture, the girl continues to talk incessantly. Young people are very inspiring, but in order to get strength from somewhere, everyone must eat, observing the regime. The incomprehensible muttering from behind a mouthful of food serves as consent. Just about to take another bite of this wonderful sandwich, the boy pauses and asks if the lady would like to eat anything. It all sounds nice enough, but they call her Granny again. Turning half around, the boy holds out an untouched sandwich, offering his grandmother something to eat, because it is very tasty, and it seems that she herself would really like it, despite everything. A slight embarrassment mixed with surprise is noticeable somewhere in the depths of Hami's eyes. She misheard or was just called old lady without a good reason. No one here knew about her past and past life, but then how did all this happen to her? The young man, smiling, says that she should not be afraid and should not worry about anything. Since he saw this girl, the abilities, so to speak, have grown, and new unusual skills have emerged because she is a fortune teller. Giggling, the guy talks about how great his mood is today, so he can tell something. But as a person, he expresses himself only to Grandma, and no one else, and only in secret. Sitting closer, the interlocutor began to tell about how the future wife of the crown prince really lives in this castle. The girl only raised an eyebrow, saying that this is not true, since this is said literally in every house. The thing is, no one knew where exactly this girl lived, so the best solution was to go door to door and search, long and hard, but eventually reaching the goal. It was really worth it and could help everyone around. The boy clearly had no intention of interfering in the affairs and problems of the future, just as he didn't want to ruin the past. So he should relax and not even think about anything there, so that it would be easier for everyone. The interlocutor mentioned that the rumor about Granny was not particularly important, so why spread it? Something lifted from the girl's soul. realizing that this was what she wanted to hear for so long. This made the situation much easier overall. Hammy thought about everything that was happening, but the next moment she realized that there was no point in it, and only quietly asked again whether it really was unimportant, receiving an answer that she did not expect at all. A situation like the old woman's only happens once every few centuries. Had similar situations ever happened? There was no clear explanation. She found herself in a child's body, and it worried her, to put it mildly, a little, even if her current life was quite wonderful. But there were still many buts. Pulling his hood almost to his chin, the stranger continues to talk about how, after all, it doesn't matter anymore. The girl shouldn't worry, but just live as her soul desires. The only thing that remained cloudy was that the fortune teller did not see and did not know whether it was a gift or just fate. The prints were quite blurred, and therefore nothing came out. Hammy was a little nervous, clutching her apron with her hands, although she should not have done so. It was incredibly difficult for the girl to accept these words, but at the same time they caused some joy, allowing her soul to dance. She really could live the way she wanted, and finally not think about anything, not be responsible for bad consequences. An unexpected inspiration dawned on the beauty. The question had been on the tip of her tongue for a long time, but only now she had the courage to ask. What happened to the child who lived in this body before the girl was reborn? The sandwich slowly rose to his mouth. The man says that he once again claims to be a fake. As for this question, the old woman was in this body from the very beginning, but she just found out about it much later than it was necessary. Everything was so confusing that it was very difficult to figure it all out right away, considering that the interlocutor continued to eat at the same time. It turns out that they both initially had the same souls, but after the separation, they continued their lives separately. Time passed, and the reunion finally happened. The owner of the body is none other than the granny, so the body can be disposed of at one's own discretion. Shocked by such news, the girl still could not believe it, asking again, but she was told yes, time and time again. They have one soul for both of them. But then it is unclear where Hammy's memories disappeared to, because after that morning when the beauty woke up in the mansion, it was impossible to remember anything else. Literally reading the thoughts of the person standing next to her, the fortune teller tries to incite. She probably doesn't remember her adventures that happened when she was 15, to which the lady only nods, because it's true. She grew up a long time ago and vaguely remembers what happened. Having caught the maid on the right answer, the man assures that the same reason is here, and there is absolutely nothing strange. You just have to accept reality. With each passing minute, the number of doubts grew. Moving closer to the young man, she continued to ask again whether it was true and whether he really thought so. It was simply impossible not to remember even a small moment from your life. But the fortune teller quickly interrupted the girl again, clarifying the situation. The grandmother's soul is much stronger, so in the end it turned out exactly like this. And nothing can be changed. It's incredible. Just incredible how big the soul of a child at 15 years old had to be for everything to go well without any hitches or bad things. Having completely finished his meal, getting up from his seat, the guy once again reminds that there is no point in worrying. Very soon, a little time will pass and the current image will become habitual. If you do not dwell on it too much, then this can be considered another opportunity to return to youth, which cannot be missed. The body becomes young, and naturally the soul too. This cannot be changed, and it is worth accepting. All changes are always for the better, or they can be corrected so that everything works the way you want it to. Long, graceful arms rise into the air to stretch. The fortune teller says that his mouth hurts like crazy from talking for so long, but he doesn't regret anything. If the girl ever needs information again, she only needs to contact him through the mage's castle, and the answers will find themselves. Turning towards the exit, the magician smoothly moves to the final notes of the conversation. It was not worth delaying for another second, because with each minute the risk of being caught increased, and it became unsafe. Hammy asked a question, trying to find out who could fall into the clutches of this place, but no clear explanation followed. There was one scary person here who could arrange for the magician to have his ears torn out. Waving his hand and saying thank you for the food, the young man seemed to evaporate. He was no longer here. The main character was overcome with excitement. It wasn't that she cared, but without knowing a name or a face, the chances of seeing each other again were exactly 0. It might have been easier if she knew exactly how to contact the person, but nothing could be returned. The eyes lit up, remembering the good news. What was more important now was that the girl had to manage someone else's life and somehow live without any thoughts, trying to realize all her past dreams and ideas. At first glance, it seemed like an overwhelming amount of work, but at the same time, it was more than possible. The young master and Hammy were sitting on the couch in the room they usually spent most of their time in. The training, as if on schedule, had started again. The girl was trying to read some simple children's book about a mouse and a kitten. The words sometimes didn't read as they should, and Cassian corrected her. The story was clearly not the best one. The kitten eats the mouse right after another conversation. Having read up to this point, the girl widened her eyes, trying to understand why she was being punished in the form of this book. The red-headed one forbids stopping and recommends to just continue reading, because the further you go, the more interesting the plot becomes. The girl quietly agreed, deciding to continue reading in order to understand how the book will end. Smiling, understanding the heroine's tenacity, the young man says that this story is about a mouse and how it fights for life inside a cat. In his thoughts, the red-headed man praises the young lady because she learned to read much faster than he expected. Diligently reading and trying to pronounce absolutely all the sounds, the girl already finishes reading the first paragraph, from which she manages to find out that this is only the first day of 7 days during which Luca is going to get out. The mouse begins his explorations, walking around in the cat's belly, while the book is literally at Hammy's eye level. The guy sat silently next to him, turning his gaze to the person. The eyes slide over the girl. The young man notices her beautiful lips, with which she so ineptly tries to pronounce words correctly. The maid's uniform almost always flaunts on the girl, but this time everything seems completely different. A call from the right side of the sofa brings me back from my thoughts to reality. The dark-haired girl asks how to read a certain word, which in fact turns out to be a simple and easy word: death. Quickly, thanks to her teacher, the girl just continues reading her entertaining story. The word fit perfectly into the right sentence, which couldn't help but please. The only choice to get out in the story was not the best, or to put it simply, just strange. With each word she read, the girl's eyes widened more and more. She stopped, turning to the gentleman, asking if he thought it strange. The book had a peculiar spelling, as incomprehensible as its contents. This could not help but disturb the readers, especially the girl who had never read anything before. Taking the book in his hands, the young man, without even thinking, confirmed his words, saying that the plot was indeed a little strange, which could not help but confuse him. The best solution would be to simply change the book to another one. The bewilderment makes it clear that the interlocutor was clearly not prepared for such reactions, and in general was not prepared to read such books with such a genre. The boy offers another book, The Feud of Apple and Peach, but a second later says that this is another cruel children's book. Cassian had clearly expected to hear a refusal to read such works, but when asked about it, the answer was only a short yes. There seemed to be no sensible reason for this. The girl immerses herself in her reading again. The Peach and the Apple was not one of the best children's stories, but it was certainly not the worst. The conversation developed, and more details were learned from this story. The book talked about how the apple's provocations made the Peach's cheeks turn even pinker. This moment had absolutely no key meaning, but looking at the girl, the young master for some reason felt very embarrassed. Pink, peach-like cheeks, concentrated eyes showed how innocent the girl was, which could not help but attract attention. A wild excitement covered Cassian like a cold wave. It seemed that the guy became even more nervous when he caught himself thinking about things in such a way. It was incomprehensible and scary to understand his feelings and himself. Not finding any valid excuse, the young man stopped the girl, saying that this was enough for today. His hand dropped to the book, as if trying to make him be listened to. The girl could only blink her eyes in response. The first excuse he came up with seemed pretty convincing. The boy started talking about Master Blake, saying that it was almost time for class and they should continue next time so they would have time to prepare for class. His thoughts were racing back and forth because Cassian couldn't figure out why he was so concerned about this young lady. With his head cocked to the side, Hammy can't believe that all of this just came from the mouth of the boy himself, who, by the way, couldn't shut his mouth. According to him, studying is important, and today he must listen carefully to the teacher, which is the pure truth that he has to agree with. The main character looked thoughtfully at the floor. She was sure that nothing like that had happened, and perhaps the young man had simply gotten sunstroke from the rays, which was, of course, self-deception. Hurrying up and already approaching the door, the guy opens it slightly, as if inviting, giving instructions and saying that she should go already. Staying too long was not a good idea, so it is clear how it happened. Someone had clearly beaten the couple to it, because a moment later the teacher was standing in the room, rolling his eyes in surprise, realizing that he might not have arrived quite on time. There was no apology, but that was how it was. The tone of his voice had become almost hostile, and Cassian, by declaring that he still seemed to have a little time left, was almost trying to send the teacher away, even if that wasn't the right thing to do. Blake's patience was running out, crossing every line. Straightening his back and preparing a whole tirade on this matter, the man says that at the last lesson it was said that it would be moved an hour earlier today. Apparently, the kid hadn't been listening very carefully, and this could not help but disappoint. A slight wave of anger takes over the hero. The fist slowly clenches and falls limply, unable to say or do anything. You can't help the problem with anger or force because everything was really discussed a long time ago, and there is no way out. The teacher, however, was not going to be too verbose. A slight smile lit up his face because the impression was creeping into his head that the rumors were indeed true, which certainly could not but please. Mr. Blake bows his head gallantly and greets Hammy, saying that he knew they would meet again. The greeting he returns is just as warm, though nothing less could be expected from this girl. So to speak, a note of disgust is drawn on the expression of the young viscount's face. He whines again about the incomprehensible greeting, which is obviously absolutely meaningless, absolutely indifferent to the rules of etiquette. Smiling even wider, the blonde reassures them that he just wanted to know how true the rumors were. Maybe he shouldn't have said that, but there was no going back. The kids were very curious to know, so the very first question was about what they were about. Without missing a beat, the man says that everyone is whispering about how the young master is teaching this lady to read. Quite convincing, except that there is also a rumor about how this little rascal has devoted all his attention to just one maid. However, it was too early to know such things. Pretending to put his hand to his cheek, the teacher began to talk about how worried he was. The young man had no intention of studying, which meant that in that case he was powerless and could hardly teach anyone else properly. The anger starts to show again, taking over. Cassian frowns, asking if he was hearing things or if this was genuine displeasure at the elite's actions. His appearance did not bode well, but the most he could do was cry. The conversation smoothly flowed into checking homework. Knowing that the young man had not read The History of the Foundation of the State, he decided to tease, saying once again, "These are somewhat easy things, just the basics in your own and others' learning." The offer was, to put it mildly, unexpected. Mr. Blake, turning to Hammy, said that today she could attend their lesson. The certainty that she would receive a huge amount of information did not give her peace. Opening her mouth in surprise, she only had enough strength to gently ask again whether it was true and whether she really could. This practice was one of the best, and the offer was more than tempting. Even after several minutes, it was still impossible to believe, so the girl just pointed her finger at herself cutely, trying to believe everything that was happening, while the man smiled softly, assuring her that it was true. The next second, the blonde leans over the lady's ear and starts talking in a conspiratorial tone. He really thinks that if Hammy is present at the lessons, Cassian's behavior will improve, which could be very beneficial. As she continued to tell all the good and bad things about the upcoming event, the girl caught herself thinking that this was one of the best ideas in recent times. It didn't take long to force or think. The beauty looked resolutely at the owner and, still addressing Black, confirmed her involvement. Both stood aside and smiled sweetly as if nothing had happened, when, as a young man, he was clearly in shock. His eyes widened. He could not believe what he was hearing, because it was unthinkable that a girl would be present at the classes. It would be a disaster. Distracted from the interesting dialogue and turning towards the sofas, the lesson begins. Today the topic was the same, about the history of the state. We stopped on page 302, which means we can continue from there. It will not be difficult. Hammy quickly sat down on the sofa next to the teacher, still smiling. She folded her hands and seemed to have forgotten about the other person in the room. Her words were finally finishing him off, but she suggested that they go and finally sit down as the teacher wanted. Horror and some disappointment took over the young master's mind. It was really unpleasant, and he wanted to say something about these two, but it didn't end well. The man takes out some unnecessary papers from his briefcase on which, probably, another strange topic is written. The girl moved even closer, talking about how she can't wait to find out what they will tell today. Cassian froze and seemed ready to cry. Why everything had turned against him was unclear. It wasn't that something terrible had happened, but it felt like something terrible was about to happen without any thought. The boy presses his hand to his body, looking down at the floor, but still noticing the couple who continued to talk, without a clue as to the meaning of any of the words. The situation was frankly strange, but perhaps it was just his imagination. He catches himself thinking that the whole problem is in Hammy, who is sitting here. He would really like to throw the girl out of his head and admit that it was worth it a long time ago, because standing here, in the middle of the room, he felt completely broken. Blake was really very handsome. His manner of communication was able to bribe everyone around him, which is why he didn't want to leave these two at all. The guy knew that a lot of maids in the house had already fallen for the beauty of the teacher, who didn't even put any effort into it. He couldn't allow another case. A quick and unclear thought flashed through my head like a whirlwind. I didn't want to believe it, but what if the maid also liked the professor? And there was no point in trying to prevent anything, since it had happened a long time ago. Such strange things. He didn't even want to think about them. He just wanted to forget about everything and never return to it. Assuring himself that this couldn't be, and that it was all a lie, young Cassian shook his head, trying to shake off the obsession that appeared out of nowhere. Sighing, the guy understands that he has no choice. No one will let him just stand there and analyze the situation in silence. So he will have to walk on the spot and listen carefully to the information. Already sitting in the chair near the table, the boy decided that he would try not to say a word. He did not want to attract attention. And on top of all that, the sight of these two was still terribly irritating, for no reason at all. The teacher watches the red-headed man take the stack of papers and start reading them. He was right after all, and the fidget's behavior improved as soon as this young lady appeared here. Something had definitely changed. Let's get this straight. But everything was fine. After some time, a great idea came to the teacher's mind. He wanted to organize some kind of mini quiz in which he would have to participate. Therefore, the question about the creator of the summary after the previous emperor was immediately processed and asked. Cassian was still lost in his thoughts, and so obviously he didn't hear the answer right away, which was quite strange. Only after 10 to 15 seconds, the young man realized that he was asked something and gave an answer. The professor says that this is right, and the person sitting next to him smiles proudly and shows signs of support, making it clear that she is still there and is happy because he is making great progress. In the aristocratic world, there is an order of things. Something goes away with time, and something comes, and this is inevitable, because power changes, and after that, each new ruler wants to establish his own, new laws. This is not a bad setup at all. Two young souls who clearly have feelings for each other, expressing care and other feelings, seem to be just waiting for the moment when they would be allowed to fly out into the wild. When the time comes, there are things that rightfully return. One of these things is time itself. But also in this category can be included heat and cold, which in summer or winter do not spare absolutely anyone. The two maids who are in the yard cleaning seem to be exhausted by the scorching sun. Their red faces and sweat make it clear that they have been there for more than an hour, although they have no choice. One of the girls started talking about a magical cooling tool that was part of the Emperor's chamber. It would have been much better if a man had used it, or if each of them had been able to do it. But it was not to be. Hammy bowed her head and placed it on her hands, remembering that there was definitely talk of magic. She had heard about it, and more than once. But it all turned out to be pure truth, presented as a lie. Trying not to think about how surprised she was by magic, the girl remembers her past life. In that dimension, there were phones that you could use to take photos, listen to music, and even make calls. There was no point in being so surprised by little things. At the moment, this heat and this weather are more important than any magic. The young lady bent over, trying not to fall because of how much the sun was beating down on her head. When she woke up, she decided that this couldn't go on any longer, and that she had to do something urgently. There was no time to waste, and she had to come up with some idea that would save everyone from this heat. A minute later, the beauty was already on her way to the kitchen, and a few minutes later, she was standing right next to the entrance. The first thing she wanted to say was about Sujongwei. They should cook, and then it would help everyone around them. The chef, who had appeared literally a second ago, tried to repeat the name, but stumbled and asked again what it was. The answer was not long in coming. It turned out to be a drink made of cinnamon and ginger with boiled honey and sugar. It doesn't sound like much, but it promises to be amazing. The man stands there in bewilderment. There are so many ingredients that it seems like it's not a drink at all, but something else. Hammy eagerly replied that it was. No need to get hung up on the ingredients or other things, because this mixture helps to endure the heat much better than ordinary chilled water. The man, without thinking twice, agrees, moving around the kitchen towards the table where he could lay out all the necessary things. The girl seemed impatient. The first thing that appears on the table is cinnamon and ginger. A very pleasant smell spreads throughout the room, but the idyll is interrupted. The red-headed man says that he got everything he needs, but is the girl really sure that these are the right ingredients that she needs? Looking at the table, the girl says that everything is great. Another highlight could be persimmon or pine nuts, but overall, everything will work out and will work even in this form. There's no need to be nervous about it. Smiling, the interlocutor says that he is happy with this turn of events. Only Hammy wanted to give literally everything she wanted. This person was so beautiful that it was impossible to feel sorry for her or refuse her anything. The cook, of course, takes on the cooking. This is his profession, and he was sure that he would do everything in the best possible way. The girl was ready to stay here and manage the process so that Sujeongwa would turn out exactly as it should be. Less than 30 minutes passed before the process was finally complete. Making the final adjustments, the beauty says that now the drink needs to be left to simmer for another hour, then cooled and bottled. After a while, the first bottle was legally ready and filled with an unusually smelling mixture, making it clear that the two young people had done an excellent job. The man was almost falling asleep on the go. The main character immediately noticed this, saying how tired the man looked after everything that had happened, although there was no particular reason for it. Rubbing his tired eyes with his hand, the interlocutor apologizes for accidentally dozing off when the situation did not require it. In response, the only thing heard was that the girl did not pay attention to such a thing, because the man was really very exhausted. Although time passed unnoticed, what was more important was that now the finished drink could be tasted and appreciated. The dark-haired lady was already holding a small container with a poured portion in her hands. A slight disbelief is reflected on the face. It was quite logical, since the cook had never tried anything like this before, so this mixture was a revelation of the century. The resulting drink was more like coffee, but the smell was very different from the usual. Sujeongwoo is drunk not from cups, but from bowls. No one knows why it is customary to do it this way, but it cannot be changed, and no one complains about the convenience. When he brought the container to his lips, the man clearly didn't expect anything special, but he tried it out of politeness and because, after all, this drink took more than 2 hours to prepare. After taking just a sip, the man tore himself away from the bowl, trying to formulate his thoughts into clear words, but his attempts were not successful, even if he tried very hard. The taste was incredible, juicy, as if he found himself in a refreshing meadow and nothing else mattered. The girl, seeing the pleasure they were experiencing, carefully asked if her potion had suited the cook. What was important was the assessment of a person from the outside, not the one who had prepared it. The red-headed one still couldn't bring himself to say anything. Every time after one word, he stuttered or stopped, saying that it was very good. However, the dark-haired one still persisted, asking again. Finally, giving free rein to his feelings, a stream of words flowed from his mouth. It was really insanely delicious, and no one denied it. No one had ever tasted such deliciousness, because the combination of ginger and honey notes really went very well with the other ingredients. It still didn't fit in my head how it happened. The cooking process didn't look complicated, and the taste was achieved with such simple ingredients. Usually some problems still arise as soon as you start cooking, but not this time. Quickly changing his mind, the cook says that this won't do. You can't give it to the maids because you should treat the viscount too. Absolutely everyone should try it. And so today you will need to serve this drink for dinner. While she says that it's not worth thanking, the girl doesn't mention that there are a few more equally important elements of preparation that complete the process. Now that the drink is already cold, it's worth pouring it into glass bottles and leaving it in the shade. If everything is done properly, then the maids, suffering from thirst and heat, will be able to look under the tree and take a bottle if necessary. The answer was not long in coming, and the red-headed one in agreement nodded, promising to give some to the other workers. The heat really killed all strength and desire to do anything. Because of this, everyone looks powerless, and therefore the potion will definitely please everyone. You don't have to be a fortune teller to be sure of your actions. The man takes all the bottles in his arms, trying not to drop a single one. The main character, standing behind him, only says that Sujongwoo can be prepared more than once, so you can safely dispose of the drinks. Thoughtfulness descended on the beauty's mind. Now it seemed to her that this time it was worth preparing Sikyo rather than Sujongwan. There were simply a whole bunch of ideas. It was definitely worth choosing at least one of them for herself. The cook, who seemed to want to leave, turned his head towards the girl, asking again what it was. Now it was interesting to find out absolutely all the details. A sunny, hot day, and the castle residents who are now constantly discussing Sikyo and Sujongwa. The people called them day and night tea, so that it would be easier to remember the names, and if necessary, ask for more. The blonde agreed with her interlocutor. All the people in this house had long ago tried these wonderful drinks. There was not a single person who did not know what was happening and what these potions were. Rumors had it that even Mrs. Piella had come to try the two teas. The woman apparently liked them very much too, and so later the viscount himself thanked Hammy again for the work he had done and for his help. There is very little time left before the lesson. The teacher talks to the girl about something and then hands over a beautiful black book. It turns out that it was gratitude for the drinks he was given last time. It turns out that these wonderful potions were prepared by none other than the main character. According to Blake, he had read this book when he was still studying at the academy, which meant he was sure that the young woman would like it. The girl did not know how to accept gifts, so she began to say that she should not have given anything. However, it was just a sign of gratitude and attention. The book had to be with the girl because Red Desert is a classic masterpiece, and no one has the right to argue with that. The description really sounded great. The story was about a chase that takes place outside the country. The professor notes that the text may be similar to a martial arts manual. A smile spreads across the heroine's face because what she gave is not as significant as this. Surprised at how modest the girl is, the teacher notes that she is an even more skilled craftswoman than rumors say. The confrontation continues because the beauty believes that she should thank the young man for enjoying the drink. Placing his hand on his chest, Blake makes a pleasant comment about how glad he is that the young master has someone like Hammy by his side. Hammy, in turn, says roughly the same thing, because without a good teacher by his side, everything would be different. Listening to all this was not the best idea for the young master. The face expressed only dull colors and emotions. Before the girl appeared in the lesson, no tricks helped to improve the atmosphere, even if all possible efforts were made to do so. Thoughtfully putting his finger to his chin, the guy tries to understand what is so special about this professor. His interlocutor's ringing laughter blooms like a flower even at the edge of the earth. She had never laughed like that with him. But soon this whole world will turn into a jungle with flowers. A thought came to mind. Perhaps the beauty simply likes smart and handsome men. The teacher could not help but fit this description, so there was no doubt, not even a little. It was hard to wrap my head around. Hard to believe. Was it true or not? Was Hammy really just like the other maids who all liked Mr. Blake? This thought hurt my consciousness, giving me the opportunity to feel disappointed or even start crying. If you think about it, the maid is still very young. She is only 15 years old, which means that in the eyes of the blonde, she looks like a little child, and this cannot be changed, because age is not subject to control. Is this really unrequited love? Because the girl is unrequitedly in love with this man. It's worth forgetting about it. Otherwise, everything will only get worse. There was no better solution than to jump up from my seat after 10 minutes of silence and shout that the guy also has a lot of books. He doesn't really need them all, even throw them away. So there is an opportunity to give them all away. The confusion conveys the words that were not asked, which perhaps one wanted to ask, but did not want to interrupt the young man. It was obvious that he was in no mood at all, which was not a very good sign. According to the red-headed man, it would definitely be better this way. All unnecessary books could be given to Hammy, who would definitely enjoy reading them from morning till night. Heading to the exit, the boy asked to wait for him at least 15 minutes until he brought everything he needed. Still without saying a word, the two stood and looked at the door after the gentleman who was leaving. No one understood what had just happened and why this performance had been arranged, but it was immediately clear that he was not himself. Literally a second later, the blonde stopped thinking about the boy and, turning his head towards the young lady, continued the conversation. His wife really liked it, and she was incredibly happy to try the drinks that really helped her. Hammy did not expect such a turn of events, but she began to smile even more than before, because the more people she managed to please, the happier she had to be. The wife also offered to give her a book, and it was very nice of her. The girl was glad that she had managed to please Mrs. Blake, so the best option was to ask the man to convey her words of gratitude to her as soon as he returned home. Cassian seemed ready to fall over from the sheer number of books. He already had 4 in his hands, but that was not enough. And so, grabbing onto everything possible, he clearly and confidently continued to build a tower of things that tried to cover his face. It was impossible not to look at the two of them who were still chatting about something. The professor mentioned that his fiancée had very severe toxicosis, and therefore it was impossible to eat anything. However, Su Jungwan was perfectly digested without any visible problems. Putting her hand to her cheek, expressing concern, the girl is glad that it happened this way, but then says that toxicosis is a rather complicated thing. Ginger is good, but because of the cinnamon, you shouldn't drink a lot of the drink. Otherwise, everything may not be as you would like. The girl promises that in future, she will prepare drinks more often so that the man can share them with his wife. The gratitude sounded rather hesitant, because it was really very kind, but she did not want to cause too much inconvenience. A hand falls on the shoulder of the interlocutor, who looks completely confused. The main character, in turn, says that everything is fine, because it is so hard for pregnant women. She knows everything about the birth of a child, and therefore understands how difficult it is when there is a lack of knowledge of what to do. Literally insisting, the girl says that it will not be difficult for her to take care of his wife, and the least she can start with. And what she can do is prepare drinks for consumption at least several times a week. There were a lot of ideas, and one of them was to create some clothes for the child. Today, the girl had plenty of time after the lesson and doing all her duties, so it was a chance to do something interesting. The city of Divine Heel was only a kilometer away from the mansion. The road did not take that long, allowing you to roam around if you left early in the morning. The main character, dressed in a beautiful black dress, stood in the middle of the road, not quite understanding where the thing she came here for was. She needed a shop with fabrics, which she had long since run out of, which she should have bought in reserve. Passing other shops and beautiful green bushes, Hammy was still trying to figure out where this shop should be. There was no way out, since it was not worth returning without fabrics. Otherwise, there would be no material for making children's clothes. Something flying from above caught her attention. It wasn't a very heavy thing, but the girl didn't think she would see something like that in the city, let alone in this world. A beautiful paper airplane fell into the hands of a little girl. It almost crashed into a bush, but she had to jump to catch it. Perhaps she should have thrown it back, because these are probably some children who have nothing better to do, so they are playing. Her eyes dropped to the find, and the girl suddenly noticed that the thing was not empty. On the paper from which the toy was rolled up, something was written in ink, as if intended for someone. The eyes quickly ran over the lines of the paper, which had to be unfolded to get a full, readable sheet with a message. It seemed that all this was written by some magician. The man wrote that he had managed to read all the drafts of the Principles of Magic sent last time, but in terms of conclusions, nothing could be drawn from it. The freaks who made a mistake do not even deserve food. The heroine does not understand what all this means. It seems that in order to preserve the peaceful part of magic, it is worth expanding the stages to 12 again, instead of 8. But this does not look too convincing. The theory of Rombride was used, which was completely unfamiliar to the girl. Everything written on the sheet looks more like a kind of cipher. The sender asked not to engage in useless activities because it affects the integrity of the soul and the future that the recipient managed to see too much. It was about spying on someone without using magic and everything else unnecessary. It was immediately clear that the person who wrote this was very angry. The attention is drawn to a small inscription placed at the very bottom, immediately after the text. Alfie is the name of the sender. The strange encryption was created for other purposes, but these purposes were not easily accessible. It wasn't immediately clear why all this was happening and who it was sent to, but the heroine noticed that the letter was clearly not intended for her. She had no connection with magic and had never seen any drafts. The first thing to do was to fold the paper again. It should look like an airplane again, exactly the same as it was before it fell into Hammy's hands. The beautiful toy was back in the hands of the main character. It seemed as if no one had ever taken it apart. The girl was pleased with her work. Raising his hand, the airplane took off. Having risen into the air, the toy flew in the other direction, even without any wind force. There was still something very strange about what happened. The beauty's eyes lit up with a lively sparkle. There are still things in the world that can surprise, but at the same time do not require too much energy. Just a piece of paper that seems too beautiful. After only 10 minutes of searching, the beauty appeared right in front of the dark wooden doors. The comic book store was successfully found, which meant that success had been achieved. One of Hammy's most important skills is to quickly cope with the tasks at hand. The girl managed to order fabric for new clothes for the teacher's baby. Then it was time to go for treats at the request of colleagues. A shop caught his attention, located just a meter away from the place the young lady had just visited. His head slowly turned, noticing something interesting to himself. A small but wonderful figurine of a white tiger stands alone in the display case. Cassian said that he liked tigers, but even without words, it was possible to understand this, since he always asked to make all possible embroideries with this particular animal. The decision was made. The young man, not understanding what just happened, stares at the figurine of the animal in his hands. It's quite cute, and he would like to say more words, but the only thing he can say is, "Thank you." Looking up at the person standing next to him, the guy still can't figure out why she did it. Even a small gift looked more like a gesture of attention, and that couldn't help but please him. Hiding his eyes, embarrassed, the young man asked again if it was true that it was bought for him, because he needed confirmation once again, even if it was already obvious, since the girl was not going to take the figurine back. Hammy, adjusting her hair, asks him, a little confused, if everything is to his liking, because such questions lead to a completely different idea. It is normal for people not to like gifts, but she did not want that to happen. The boy protested, saying that he would never say such a thing. He really liked the gift. In gratitude for the literacy lessons and the books he gave her, after the girl saw this tiger, she immediately remembered Cassian and wanted to thank him. Bowing his head, once again looking at the cute figure, the boy did not count on a gift, because he believed that he had not done anything special. And even if he had, it still would not have changed his opinion much. Hammy, with eyes like two large plates, looked at her interlocutor like a puppy, trying to figure out his exact point of view. It was quite difficult, but there was nothing, after all, impossible. Cassian's face wrinkled and his eyes closed. It seemed as if he was in great pain. Although this was not true, the concerned person began to ask what had happened and why he was so upset. Changing his facial expression so as not to frighten the maid, the red-haired man, still unable to look straight, spoke words of gratitude. And this is the pure truth, because he is immensely happy. Hammy thought about something. If she had known earlier that he would like it so much, she would have thought about it a long time ago, right after the first lesson. She was not sure what she could give, but if she wanted, she could always find something suitable. Not paying attention to the obvious confusion of his interlocutor, the young viscount decided to do more important things. It was worth deciding where to put the gift. One of the tables where lessons were usually held is definitely not suitable. One day, the figurine might accidentally be pushed to the floor, and then the boy will never forgive himself. His eyes catch on the second table, which is also not suitable, as is all the furniture in the room. Suffering from youthful maximalism, the young man suddenly says that perhaps one of the best ideas is to change the old interior to a new one, and then things will immediately become much easier for everyone. The boy really liked the tiger, and it was worth giving gifts. The reaction was simply impeccable. Distracted from contemplating such a cute picture, the girl noticed that the lesson was about to start, and therefore they should hurry. Leaving the guy all alone in the room so that he could finally figure out where to place his gift, Hammy opens the doors to the hallway and hurriedly leaves. She has one thing that cannot be postponed. In her room, the maid wonders if these things are enough, or if she should wait a few more days and make even more copies during this time. The question seems almost impossible to solve. Beautiful baby clothes are lying on the bed. The multicolored colors are very captivating, making it clear that the baby will become the most fashionable after birth. The bunny toy looks even more wonderful than all the other clothes. It was worth finding a bag to pack all this heap. And here is joy. It was right at hand, without taking time to search. Accessories are inside, and deft hands tie a tight knot for safe transportation. The only downside is that the wrapped gift turned out to be too heavy. Even without lifting anything, The girl already understands that it will be quite difficult to bring it to the room she needs, almost halfway across the hall, but she cannot give up. The door to the office opens quietly. Voices can be heard from the room, discussing another book or assignment for the next lesson. It seems that the lesson is in full swing, but it is already coming to an end. The professor, holding a textbook in his hands, talks about a state that took 5 years for the previous ruler to declare the independence of the first academy and palace. The red-haired man listened attentively and followed the text in the book. Both men, noticing the maid standing there, ask her to come in and close the door. I think she should come in and sit down so that after the lesson there will be an opportunity to discuss the material. The girl is still standing in the middle of the room, rooted to the spot. There are 2 possible scenarios in her head. Each of them is not bad, but the one in which she should wait until the end of the lesson and only then give the gift sounds much better. Walking further and sitting down, Hemi continued to listen to the topic of the story. She was always interested in reading, but even more interested in listening to Professor Blake's stories. He clearly had talent. As it turned out, the high-status aristocrats did not want a division of influence and therefore protested. For future generations, the decision turned out to be correct and was appreciated. According to the teacher, if it weren't for the previous ruler, the chain of transmission of magic traditions that goes from generation to generation could have been interrupted, and that would have been the end of it. Not knowing this person, Hemi for some reason was sure that the previous ruler was a very outstanding person. In the divine land where they live, only a few people have life-giving, enchanting magic. Only a few people can use it to their advantage. But on the other hand, the areas of magic are diverse. Magic is a substance that cannot be touched, but can be obtained. There are over 500 types, and unfortunately, not all of them are as safe as we would like. There are not many mages left, and over time, a crisis will form in the rare areas of magic. This could have led to extinction, but fortunately, the previous ruler decided to gather all the mages in one place to keep records, and so that mages could share knowledge with each other. The Castle of the Mages is the place that still functions today. Today, the ideology has changed, but the construction still carries great significance. Any nose of any curious fortune teller can reach the magicians, but not everyone is so lucky. The girl recalls how a young man who came for groceries told her to contact him through the palace if anything happened. Surely this is not the kind of place that can be found based on interest alone, which means that this can be safely forgotten. Finishing his fascinating story, the blonde turns to the young gentleman, talking about his manners. They have become much better, which simplifies the task and makes the professor happy. Cassian snorts, closing his eyes and turning his head away, saying that they had always been like this. But that was not true. The boy had shown his erudition, and it had sped up the material, making the process much easier. Today's lesson was over earlier than usual. Expecting to hear anything but that, the young man's eyes widened. It was to his advantage, but he still didn't understand what had influenced the situation so much that it had suddenly changed so drastically in the other direction. The girl is filled with pride for Cassian. She believes that her baby is the best, and no one can change that. He manages to do what he is capable of, even if it takes a lot of effort, but the result is simply amazing. Deciding not to show how worried he was and not to react even worse than before, the young man relaxed. He was about to leave too, and the fact that they had finished early would help a lot in that case. Smiling, the professor asks if he hasn't overworked himself. It was clearly not sarcasm, but just ordinary concern, so the boy decides to show his capabilities. He hasn't overworked himself, but on the contrary, he realized that everything was too easy, that it even became boring. The blonde decided not to comment on what was happening and simply said that he would take note. Starting from the next lesson, the teacher would try to let the young viscount go earlier, because in a few days they would begin studying international situation, which would take much more time. The best suggestion is that this lesson can be celebrated, because it went quite successfully and easily. Turning his head towards the maid sitting next to him, Blake asks her opinion about this. The girl happily agrees. Why not celebrate such an event if there is good company and the mood to do something? The next moment, Hemi remembers about her things and says that she has prepared the necessary clothes, as well as a new portion of the drink. It was quite nice of her, and so the professor smiles a little shyly and thanks her friend. The red-haired man, hearing these conversations, was quite taken aback. He did not understand what the joke was, and why they were communicating so kindly after the girl gave some things to the teacher. Mr. Blake still didn't want to stop. Like last time, he says that he can't accept such a gift without something in return. The only question is what exactly the heroine would like to receive. The brunette remembers the book again. The token of gratitude that was given to her a few days ago is quite enough for her. It is impossible to forget something like that, or want to receive something else. Holding the bundle on his lap, the man still resists, but this time he offers to invite her home for dinner. According to him, for several weeks now he has wanted to treat Hammy to something as a token of gratitude. This could not but please. The young viscount's face fell in horror. Food and an invitation to his home sounded rather strange. It no longer resembled a friendly relationship, even if they still considered themselves friends despite the age difference. In simple words, it was an invitation to a date. The young man could not believe how this had happened, because just recently it seemed that nothing could happen between them, and now everything had changed dramatically. The smiles were proof of this. Deciding to stop all this and destroy the idyll, Cassian protests. The word no sounded like a bolt from the blue. Those in the room were distracted from the conversation and asked again, trying to understand what all this meant. The young man frowned, making his intentions known. Hemi is a servant of the Winston family. Therefore, she cannot do anything without consent. My consent. Displeasure is heard in every note and word of his voice and remarks. Nothing surprising. The interlocutors are still sitting in complete silence, unable to say anything. It is easier to give the young man what he wants and let him finish his angry tirade. If the girl goes, then the young master will go with her, and this is no longer discussed. A smile of resignation appears on Mr. Blake's good-natured face. He agrees to the terms, saying that Cassian is also allowed to come to dinner. When he comes to the professor's house, he will definitely be able to meet the family. Frowning, the young gentleman is not thrilled about the idea of meeting the family. He only has enough strength to ask again if it will really be like this. There is no other way out, since the man invited Hammy initially to introduce her to his family, and in the end, refusal is not accepted. Everyone wants to get to dinner. They will be ready to do what they are told. Doubt creeps into the boy's little head. Blake said that this is his family, which means that these are his parents. It sounds rather strange, because usually you meet your relatives only in one case. A cold horror grips her insides. It's impossible. But what if in the future Hammy becomes a daughter-in-law and then everything is over, even though she is still very young? The blonde had long since switched back to his interlocutor, asking about the exact date. The best solution was to see him tomorrow at lunch. Agreeing to such conditions, the beauty nods her head, saying goodbye in the same way as Cassian. The carriage from the Winston estate with a beautiful horse drives down the street. The moment when the boy learns the whole truth and kicks the blanket even closer, predetermining everything that will happen. A sad look looks somewhere out the window. He asked for this dinner himself, but thinking about everything that is happening, he clearly does not want anything bad to happen. His head turns towards the person sitting opposite. The beautiful brunette is also looking out the window. I don't think there's anything too interesting there, but perhaps she's just uncomfortable being alone with the young gentleman, with nothing to talk about. A strange thought suddenly came to mind. Looking at the heroine for more than 1 minute, the young viscount realized that she was still wearing the same dress. The next question is addressed to Hammy, because he is really interested in knowing why she wears all the same clothes. Last weekend, when the girl went out on errands, she wore the same outfit. It wasn't unacceptable, but it couldn't help but bother a person who cared. The window lost all its appeal, and the young lady turned her gaze to the man sitting opposite her. She honestly did not understand what the problem was, so she asked what was wrong with that. She could wear whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted. Not knowing what to say, the young man told the lady to simply forget about this conversation. This was the best solution, but only for the time being. Come to think of it, Cassian had never seen Hammy in anything else. Always a maid uniform or this dress. All the other maids were probably the same, but they at least had a few changes of clothes for going out. He didn't want to start this conversation, not knowing at all how it could all end, but it was too late to back out. The proposal was to buy some clothes after dinner. The girl asked in surprise why she wanted that. The argument sounded quite convincing. A girl should have at least 1 change of clothes, and even better, 5 clothes. This is one of the most necessary, but if she needs anything else, there is no need to be shy. They can always go and buy something together. The beauty still didn't know how this world worked, so she assumed that wearing only maid's clothes here wasn't a good idea. Thinking over all the pros and cons, the maid agreed, remembering in time that she had recently seen a clothing store in Kabluchka. None of this was about spending as little time with the teacher as possible. However, it could work and be useful in two cases. The plan was to arrive and immediately move on. Of course, no one was going to stick to it, but Cassian was pleased to know that Blake would not have time to like Hammy even more. The Black's house can be seen from afar. Beautiful panoramic windows and beautiful mixed colors that can be seen from afar because of the wonderful pink roof. As he leaves the house, the man bows slightly, asking how the young master and Hammy got here and if there were any problems on their way here. Greeting the teacher, the girl thanks him, saying that everything went well, only thanks to the carriage sent by the teacher. The blonde smiles, promising that he will now take them to the guest room. The guest room of the Blake family is located in the very center of the house, and this location serves only for the convenience of people who come. Everything is done in light and blue tones. Near one of the sofas stands a blonde, dressed in a white silk dress that fits her figure perfectly. She is silent, as if waiting for the moment to say something. The couple stands and waits to be introduced, hoping that they won't have to stand there awkwardly for more than a few minutes. It could take a long time. Approaching the woman, the teacher introduces her as none other than his wife. Smiling, the lady bows her head slightly and says how pleased she is to meet them, as she has heard quite a few stories about them. Freezing, not daring to say more than one word, the guy asks again, not believing his ears. He did not expect to meet the man's wife right here. Shifting his gaze, the young man looks at the girl standing next to the blonde. He says that this is his wife, and therefore this is the family he was talking about from the very beginning. Like a pile of stones, relief falls from his shoulders. Exhaling, the boy himself does not understand why he felt so much better, despite the lack of feelings. Catching himself thinking that such an attitude is extremely strange, he seriously thinks about what is happening and why exactly to him. Approaching Hammy, the lady looks at the beauty with her eyes, saying how surprised she was by the clothes given to the baby. Interrupting, the maiden asks if any problems arose. Still smiling affably, the girl assures that everything is fine, because these are just works of art that it would be a shame to use. Smiling a little, trying not to show her weakness, the girl thanks, saying that next time she will create even more clothes as a gift. Wincing slightly, the woman realizes that she cannot simply accept such a valuable thing without giving anything in return. The interlocutor just waves her hand, saying that nothing is needed. The presence of the teacher in the lessons is enough for her, as well as the book that she managed to get as a gift. The sweet conversation is interrupted by the butler, who announces that the food is served. The lady, fussing, saves herself from inviting guests and continues to chat. Getting ready to take his wife to the dining room, the man carefully holds the blonde's elbow, asking her to walk more carefully. Such a couple seems like a dream come true. Two hearts that love each other until the very end. Their glances seem to be intertwined even from different corners of the room. Cassian freezes because he couldn't believe he could think badly of the guy. Blake is a very caring husband that any lady would want. The dining room of Blake's house is quite spacious, but at the same time there is no room for anything extra, which is very pleasing. People sit next to each other. Pointing to the table laden with dishes, the lady says that she is pregnant, and that is why her mother sends something almost every day. A little embarrassed by what she has to say, the girl straightens her hair, noting that the chef cooks skillfully, which means the food should be 100% enjoyable. Smiling, the teacher says that thanks to this he is always full, because his beloved has severe toxicosis, which prevents her from eating most food. Not considering it necessary to agree, the woman assures that she is full when Blake is full. Last time, she also managed to drink sujongwa, which was given to her by the maid. Unashamed of his words, the man jokingly says that he often takes advantage of his mother-in-law's favor. His wife is the daughter of a very famous aristocratic family in the coastal lands. Already moving on to their communication, the couple chats about something, because Mr. Blake claims that Lisa has suffered too much because of him, and sacrificed a lot. Hearing a familiar surname, the younger viscount asks again, trying to understand whether there was actually a mention of Count Heisel, or if he just misheard it. Without showing any embarrassment, the young man confirms his words, saying that his body is the wife of Count Heisel, and that is why he so often says that this is fabulous luck. The Heisel family is one of the most famous in the state. The rumors about the circles of the Count's wife are especially well known. The daughter of such a family was supposed to marry a marquis or a prince. Thinking about something, the red-haired man understands that a man can be smart and handsome, and then status is not important. A lady like Lisa chose a teacher instead of anyone else. As he stuck the spoon in his mouth to lick the remains, the young man couldn't stop thinking about the whole situation. It was quite logical. Time passes unnoticed, but those sitting at the table do not notice. Hammy once again examines the beautiful interior of the estate. The gaze switches to the wall clock on its own. The realization hits you pretty quickly because soon all the shops will be closing, which means it's time to leave. Before she can say anything, the lady is interrupted by a blonde who asks them to accept gifts to commemorate the day. Moving the box a little closer, Lisa asks again to accept them, and then mentions that although they are modest, they are still beautiful. Trying to object, the girl remembers that the hosts fed the arrivals an excellent dinner, so such gifts are absolutely unnecessary. Comes down to Hammy making a few more things for the baby in exchange for the jewelry. Bowing her head as if thinking about something, the brunette finally agrees. It sounds like a good turn of events, and then no one will be left out. The lady and her husband escort the guests far beyond the gate, staying to say goodbye. The guests thank them because they really found it very interesting. Thinking about something of his own, the boy realizes that going to the store today would not be the right decision for the couple. A female voice interrupts her thoughts, asking the coachman to go to the store. She has a plan and a goal, and therefore the maiden is not going to bow down to anyone. The guy hesitates a little and says that he is not sure that they will make it in time, but Hami assures that she will try to do everything as quickly as possible. The women's clothing store, Janelle, is empty as usual. The consultant sighs because if she had known, she would have located the store in the area of the goddess's knees long ago. Almost yawning, the brunette thinks about what she should do next. She just created an expensive and useless clothing brand in vain. Due to the death of the viscount's wife, they now very rarely buy women's clothing because there is no one else to wear it, which is sad in every sense. Looking around the completely empty space of the salon again, the woman sighs again. It's not time yet, but maybe it's time to close now. Some sound attracts attention, and the eye, as the very first organ, reacts with a bang, quickly twitching and turning towards the bell on the door. Blushing a little, not even expecting customers, the brunette quietly greets those who enter, saying how glad she is to see them. The joy evaporates somewhere because only slight confusion from what she saw remains on the lady's face. She opens her mouth slightly, trying to understand the situation. Right in front of the lady stand two teenagers of indeterminate middle age. One of them looks like a person of status, but this does not change anything. Trying not to hide his smile, the consultant asks what the couple is looking for here. Today, only 2 children again, which means another day has gone completely useless. Cassian is the first to respond, pointing at his companion, saying that they are looking for clothes for this girl standing next to him. Looking at the delicate features of the face, the woman understands that the clothes of the store should suit. Black hair and fair skin give a separate combination of beauty. Chuckling a little, realizing that she will most likely have to upset the children, the girl informs them that it is unlikely that they will find clothes for children of that age in their store. Finding a way out of any situation, the brunette offers to take measurements so that in the future she will have a chance to prepare new, suitable clothes. Hammy agrees, but still asks to see what is currently in the store. Trying to object, the saleswoman quickly gives in. Smiling her sweetest smile, the beauty says that she can fix the dresses herself and tailor them to her needs. It is no problem at all. Eyes widen as the girl tries to figure out if she really was just offered something to do. Handmade things look much better. Turning away, the lady thinks, if the clothes are going to be taken in, then it means that dresses that were sent to the trash because of a passing fashion can be given away. This can give them a second chance. A brilliant idea comes as if by itself. If you alter the clothes of aristocrats and sell them to commoners, then perhaps you won't have to close the store. Realizing that there is no other choice, since the money is needed, the girl smiles, offering to look at a certain model, pointing her hand to the side. The gaze shifts to a blue floor-length dress with white ruffles. Looking it over from head to toe, the owner notes that the color and style will definitely suit Hammy. Touching the fabric, the girls seem to experience great delight. It is very beautiful, and just to the young lady's liking. Grabbing his hand, the brunette offers to try on the item and then take it away, since it is inexpensive for any person. Tears appeared out of nowhere in the eyes of the hostess, ready to flow from her eyes in an unstoppable stream. Wiping her eyes with the back of her hand, Miss says that everything is fine, because she just realized something she missed, and because of that, emotions came flooding in. Interrupting the conversation, Cassian reminds that if it is a matter of price, then there is no need to worry, because no concessions are necessary. After freezing for just a few seconds, the lady slowly turns around, asking why exactly the young gentleman should do such a thing. Stuttering a bit, the guy finally explains what he wanted. At the very beginning, he was the one who said that he would buy clothes for his subordinate. Besides, Hammy is a maid, which means she belongs to the Winston family. It would be right for the young man to buy clothes without any hesitation, because it is not difficult. The topic changes abruptly when the red-haired man remembers the gift to Blake. It was customary for aristocrats to give gifts to young maids. Frowning slightly, the girl realized that there was nothing special about it, as it was accepted all over the world. She thought completely differently, but it did not change the outcome. The pause drags on, so the guy suggests going back. The store's opening hours are already over, which means a few more minutes and they'll be sent outside. Moving a little towards the cellar, the brunette remembers the owner's character. In any case, despite everything, he will still remain kind. Realizing that the young man had already left, the girl also said goodbye. Wishing good customers and a good evening, the maiden was about to disappear behind the door. The brunette stops Hammy at the exit, asking her name again, clarifying whether she works at the viscount's restaurant. The answer remains only positive. The girl asks a few more strange questions that do not affect the purchase of the dress, but the main character patiently waits for the moment when she is allowed to leave the place. The survey seems to be finally over, so the beauty smiles easily, turning around and disappearing behind the doors. Already on the go, she thanks for everything. The journey home shouldn't take too long. The girl is just mindlessly looking out the window, or perhaps she just doesn't want to voice her actions. The Duke's gaze slides again to the maid, who sits a meter away from him, as if nothing had happened. Perhaps she doesn't feel anything for you either. Violet eyes are unable to tear themselves away from the glass, thereby studying the nature outside the window. Various thoughts prevent one from thinking normally. Something nearby finally catches his attention, so Hammy carefully turns towards his companion, who has not turned away all this time. The couple stares at each other for a good 2 minutes without saying a word. The moment even seems somewhat romantic. Cassian can't stand it any longer and looks away, looking out the window again. It's unclear when it started, but the boy can't look the maid in the eyes. His cheeks have acquired a characteristic pinkish hue, betraying consciousness and thoughts. Trying to start a conversation, Hammy talks about how it's nice to get out sometimes, and she also got the chance to ride in a carriage. The dress was also a nice bonus. The conversation doesn't go well because of the hero's embarrassment, but without losing her grip, the brunette smiles and thanks her friend from the bottom of her heart. Without moving his eyes to the girl so as not to lose his train of thought, the guy catches himself on the fact that his heart is beating wildly. Next time, he can give a more expensive gift, if the situation requires it. Changing the subject and clenching her fists, the girl says that an even better gift would be health. It should always be protected, because it is the only one in life without replacement. Smiling again, the gentleman does not answer. It is not clear when it started, but one only has to look at the girlfriend, as a smile appears on her face by itself. Deciding that everything is great, the girl realizes that the young viscount was also having fun, which means they had a great time that was beneficial for both of them. The thoughts are interrupted by something in the window. It attracts the beauty's attention, forcing her to turn back to the window and look into the distance. The night sky begins to fill with stars, and only one paper airplane circles alone, without friends or an owner. A little embarrassed or scared, the girl notices that it is the same little plane. It remains to hope that this time it will not be able to fly to the lady. The redhead notices the quick change in mood, so he asks if there is something there, to which he receives a nod pointing to the thing outside the window. A little confused by his own lack of education, the prince asks again what it is, because there is nothing there, and he has never heard of anything like it. A finger shoots up into the sky, pointing at a glowing point. Out of nowhere, it begins to glow a beautiful color, illuminating everything around it. The guy shrugs, looking at the same place because he doesn't see anything. It sounds weird, but it looks even more weird. Looking up again, the lady does not let the toy out of her sight. She cannot believe that it is she and no one else who sees this thing. The eyes widen slightly, indicating that the girl is slightly confused. She wants to know why and get answers to her questions. The paper spins and circles in the air and then does some somersaults in the air, not allowing itself to fall. Looking closely at the plane, the girl realizes that it is circling above their estate, which is exactly where they are heading now. Not even a few minutes pass before the thing gets into the house and disappears somewhere. It is not clear how exactly, considering that there is no entrance from the roof. While sweeping the paths in the palace garden, Hammy is thinking about something. because she does not quite understand what the essence of the message that was written on paper a few days ago is. It seems that no one knows about this paper airplane except the person who wrote it and herself. It will remain a secret. Or perhaps she just imagined it. Even the teacher is hearing about it for the first time, so she won't be able to give any clear advice regarding writing, no matter how much she would like to. Blake's estate, as usual, glows from the inside because of the happiness of the family that lives there. It brings only joy. An elderly blonde examines a child's shirt, asking what it is. A smile spreads across her face. Covering her mouth with her hand, Lisa says that this is the creation of a noble lady she knows. She and her husband find this thing extremely amazing. The gaze switches again to the rest of the things that are peacefully lying nearby on the sofa. Mother asks who created all this. The girl decides that she needs to try to show something else, so she suggests looking at a beautiful scarf with embroidered flowers. The woman asks again who is this lady who made all these decorations. If she is known in the society, there will be too much excitement for everyone. The daughter agrees, because that's how it would have been. But now her friend will be even more surprised, because she's about to hear something more interesting. Lisa asks her mother to come closer, and then holds out her hand for her to follow her. The confusion is slightly reflected on her companion's face. Heading somewhere down the corridor, the lady promises that everything will be clear as soon as she sees the room with her own eyes. Above the door, there is a beautiful image of an unborn baby, which is carved from silver, thus becoming too shiny. The blonde listens to the instructions and therefore, carefully opening the door, goes inside, intending to see something unusual. A sigh of admiration escapes from the chest by itself, thus making it clear that the beauty is delighted with the beautiful decorations for the bedroom. The smile grows even bigger. She definitely likes what she sees. The beautiful ornaments seem to scream that the needlewoman did her best. Mrs. Blake sighs and says that, oddly enough, she doesn't think it's quite right that only their family knows about such a craftswoman. The lady is leading everything to the fact that Mother should tell the whole society about Hami, because she deserves to receive publicity and great appreciation. Asking her name again, the girl turns around, to which the blonde says that she is a servant in the house of the Viscounts Winston, although this does not sound very prestigious. Laughing a little, Lisa asks not to be surprised by such facts, because, on top of everything else, the maid is only 15 years old. While thinking about something, the Duke's wife suddenly remembers this family. Many years have passed since the Viscount's wife died. If the owner were alive, then surely everyone would already know about such a nugget. But in this situation, everything turns out completely the opposite. The girl confirms her words because if the Viscountess were alive, she would not have to ask someone from her relatives for this, since there would simply be no need for it. This situation came at a very opportune moment because there will be a tea party this weekend, which means the lady should at least bring a handkerchief to show off her skills. Blake, delighted by the offer, says it will be great publicity. The Viscount must be informed in advance, and Hami can be warned this evening. Hazel agrees, knowing that she has nothing to worry about. She always worries about her daughter's condition, but she looks extremely happy, and this is reassuring. A woman certainly cannot refuse such a request because she understands that such publicity will only benefit everyone around her. Lisa nods happily again, saying that her mother knows very well how much she respects her, as well as everything she does for the young family. Despite the choice, the girl comes up and hugs the woman a little, who sighs. She says she knows she loves her too. This beauty definitely doesn't take after her mother, who was always completely different. There is complete silence in the family estate. The head's office remains the unchanged room where all decisions are made, and that is what will be done today. Hami asks again, hesitating a bit, about the tea party, trying not to show her excitement. Today, all the families will have an event. The answer does not come immediately. The man clearly has a headache, so he holds his temple with his hand, while the butler nods his head from behind. Finally confirming his words, the young man says that if everything is fine, then he must do as he is asked. The situation obliges him to fulfill his duty. Over the past 2 days, the estate has received a ton of letters because all the aristocrats, as one, want to see the needlewoman in person. Understanding that the owner is having a hard time right now, the friend promises that he will tell the maid all the information in more detail later. All this publicity started to gain momentum after that very day. It happened 2 days ago, exactly when Mrs. Heisel promised. Sipping her tea, she carefully wipes her lips with a handkerchief she borrowed from her daughter at Blake's estate. Everything is going according to plan, and all eyes will soon be drawn to the little thing. One of the ladies sitting at the table, noticing the little thing, asks what kind of work of art is in the hands of her interlocutor. Pretending that it is of no value, the lady says that it is not a fine piece of work, but merely a handkerchief that she found. The other girl freezes, saying that the lady must be joking. None of them are very knowledgeable about art. However, they all think that this camellia flower pattern is not so common. Covering her eyes, the blonde realizes that she has piqued the curiosity of those around her enough. Soon, rumors will spread, and then, once they reach their peak, Hammy will debut at the speed of comet. Most likely it will be so. And then the girl will be able to live as an excellent designer. Thoughts are interrupted by the girl, who says that she has already seen a thing similar to this. The Duchess's eyes widen in confusion, while the other ladies look away in equal surprise, trying to understand where the conversation is heading. Continuing the story, the beauty says that while exchanging things with Winston, she saw something similar in their estate quite recently. I can't believe we're talking about the Viscount. It was last month because when the lady was looking around the house, she noticed a lot of attractive things. There was a similar pattern on the curtains because the flowers immediately caught the eye. There was even a pattern of dragons and tigers, which seemed to be on guard. I also got to try one drink. The Sujongwa and Saike were excellent, and it was the first time Miss had tried something like that in her entire life. The drinks were made by one of the maids in the house, so one has to ask if it is true that the handkerchief was created by the same maid. The words are confirmed. The friends are amazed because they would also like to meet the young girl if such an opportunity arises. This is something that should not be missed at any cost. Without showing it, Hazel just wonders if everything is okay because the attention has grown from normal to the status of excessive. This is how the situation has developed. There is no way out of it, so we will have to give what is asked of Winston's family. The man claims that there won't be many people present, since only a couple of people will respond. It will be enough to treat them to tea and start a conversation. Looking at one point, Hammy mentally writes down, guests should be well received and treated, talking about various topics for entertainment. Deciding to take this step, the brunette agrees, saying that the Duke should let go of all worries and simply trust the maid. On the day of tea, there was almost an emergency in the Viscount's house. Everyone in the house was busy and preparing to receive guests. The last event on this estate was 7 years ago, when the Viscountess was alive and interested in this case. Looking around the hall, the butler understands that if the Countess had not helped, he would have been simply unusually large and terrible out of shame. Hammy is also involved because this whole mess is wrapped around her. She is in the kitchen to supervise the whole thing. The girl is called from the side, and turning, she notices the young gentleman. He is standing near the door, not daring to go further. The guy is asked what happened, but he just continues to stand there silently, not saying a word, as if trying to pick the right lines in advance. Approaching his friend, he says that he heard some conversations that spread throughout the castle at the speed of light. There would be tea today, and he wanted to know if it was true, because he couldn't believe that after such a long time it had all happened. The redhead tries to say something, but fails miserably. It must be a burden for Hammy, who is only a maid. Finally making up his mind, the boy says that everything will be fine, so the girl shouldn't worry about anything in advance. He looks down and notes that if it's too much, she can always stop. The father has sent his son to tell the girl not to overexert herself. Quickly changing the subject to something more cheerful, the maid says that everything is in perfect order. She definitely has everything under control for the upcoming evening. The guy wanted to say something in response, but the brunette stopped him again, only repeating that she was confident in her words and strength. The redhead notices that his girlfriend looks better than he expected. She is not tired and clearly did not cry over some nonsense. Just as she was about to turn around and leave, the friend stopped the gentleman, saying that he had arrived just in time. A plate appears on the table with some beautiful delicacy laid out on it, which they offer to try. Without saying exactly what it is, the maiden asks to try it first, because she is interested in how it tastes. It is intended for guests. A little hesitant but completely trusting, the young man accepts the offered piece and then carefully bites off the edge. As soon as the food hits his mouth, Cassian freezes, trying not to show it. His eyes widen slightly in delight. Looking at Hammy, he seems to be shouting that this is simply wonderful. Understanding without words, the lady understands that there is no need to even chew because of the texture. There are only 2 hours left until tea time. In the huge white hall, there are 5 tables for receiving guests who are expected to arrive soon. Winston sits at the top table frowning. It's clear that he doesn't like this whole idea, so he can only endure it. The butler, bowing, says that Madame Friedrich has arrived. She should be escorted here immediately and shown to a convenient place. Without feeling any emotion, the man notes that she probably only came to help the Duke save face. Speaking again about those who arrived, the subordinate says that Countess Hazel has arrived, as well as Conceal, Viscountess Nymphera, and Baroness Vincelo. The gentleman asks again in surprise, but is told that this is not all, because there is also Mrs. Ilvonia and Mrs. Seveny, who are also interested. The door swings open and several girls walk into the room, dressed in beautiful, colorful dresses that suit the occasion. The Viscount freezes in slight surprise because he did not expect to see the entire high society in his estate today. One of the ladies comes closer. The man thanks her for visiting such an inconspicuous place, but she assures him that she has heard about his fame. Another lady says that even without this event, she had been thinking about visiting the castle, but today her dream finally came true. Turning to Thompson, the young man asks him to bring it quickly, otherwise the others will have time to settle comfortably in their places. Without ceasing to smile, the ladies look after the departed man, and then turn to the things that are located in the hall. They look at the beautiful embroidery and sigh in admiration, saying how wonderful it is. As Mrs. Friedrich said, there is a green dragon. One of the girls speaks more than the others. Having seen such a thing with her own eyes, she wants to look at the maid who created it even more. Changing the subject, they turn around, asking the Viscount where the maid is now. They want to quickly introduce themselves and get to know her better. The man says a little embarrassedly that this child will arrive soon. He has no other words because he does not know when the lady will arrive. The door creaks a little, so the Baroness turns towards the entrance. Understanding prompts her to look who is there. At the beginning of the hall, a beautiful brunette appears, dressed in a maid's uniform. Her face expresses joy and a little embarrassment. There are about 30 ladies here. The Duke promised that there would only be a few, but in the end he was wrong, and now everything will be much more complicated. Approaching the table to pour tea, the girl seems to hear thoughts out loud. This child is indeed that same needlewoman, but she seems too young. She puts the plate on the table and it attracts attention. There are what look like tree stumps on it, but at the same time the food smells incredible. Understanding the general confusion, the girl says that this is yakwa, a viscous and sticky potion, but extremely tasty. No one can pass by without trying it. Ilvonia looks at the tray in surprise, trying to remember if she had ever heard of yakva, but absolutely nothing comes to mind. Countess Cancel becomes the first to take an interest in the potions laid out on the table. Her gaze naturally drops downwards. She doesn't stop looking, but then she takes one in her hands, putting it in her mouth. It's worth listening and being polite when something is offered. Her face immediately reflects complete bliss. Her cheeks turn pink, and then she puts her hand on it, trying not to miss even a crumb. The girl still stands near the table, not daring to move. She says nothing and does not turn around, so the girls have to look at her back. Friedrich becomes no less determined, so, frowning a little, she heads to the trays to take the necessary thing. Taking a piece in her hands, she discreetly puts it in her mouth to taste and understand the exact taste. The food promises to be delicious. The reaction is exactly the same as the blondes in front of her. She can't tear herself away, asking again what exactly it's called, because her memory is failing her. It turns out to be incredibly delicious, so finding her voice again, she advises everyone to try it. Otherwise, she will have to eat it all by herself. The other ladies are whispering among themselves, discussing the proposed dish with interest. It is truly wonderful, and the smell itself is extremely pleasant. Conseil approaches the Viscount, saying that it would be nice to have something to drink other than tea. She asks about Sujongwa and Sika, as everyone should try it. Smiling, the man waves his hand as if giving an order to bring the glasses. They had prepared the drinks in advance. Cups and saucers appear on the table. The ladies ask what kind of drink it is, to which the Countess replies that she spoke about it last time. These two drinks are also called day and night tea because of their color, which is dark and light, as if matched in tone. Ilvania leans over to tell him about the tablecloth. She can't believe that it was actually made by that young maid who pours tea and other things. It is impossible for such a young girl to possess such skill. Until you see it with your own eyes, it is extremely difficult to believe. Hazel notices the gossip, so she says that if there are any doubts, they can be quickly dispelled by demonstrating talent. She prepared the fabric and the thread with the needle so that she could see everything in person right here and now. This idea is the best. The other ladies agree that this is a good way to go, while Hammy nods and agrees to the proposed interaction. Approaching the table with a box for threads and fabric, the girl asks what kind of embroidery they would like to see and receive made. The lady asks to make some simple flower so that it will not take much time. It will be very simple. Time passes while the beauty embroiders a train of roses. The countesses cannot help but sigh in surprise at such talent. The girls look and gasp, looking at the already finished work that they created. The napkin looks beautiful, and now everyone believes it. The lady who was discussing the girl apologizes because her age gave her the wrong impression about her skills, but she is very ashamed of her behavior. If possible, Hammy will sell her the same fabric as hers for the required embroidery. The crowd starts to talk because another lady says she was thinking about buying the cloth too. The purple-haired beauty offers 7 gold pieces. A literal auction begins as others bid their prices, and the next one is 15 gold for materials. Interrupting the beginning of the quarrel, the brunette asks them to stop and suggests creating something similar for everyone here. The rest of the room freezes, not understanding whether the hostess is speaking in all seriousness. They did not expect such a proposal to come now. Smiling, the maid says that she can teach them. It is much easier than they think, so it will not be difficult. One of the girls steps back a bit, thinking about what her answer should be. She doesn't want to be too rude. The blonde hesitates a little because her answer may not seem the best, but if it is true, then she really wants to learn. The other ladies don't show it, because learning from a maid is not something they would like to do in their lives and with their high status. The lady frowns, because this is absurd. Nowhere do they practice training aristocrats from some girl of lower status. Hazel fights back skillfully. As the saying goes, the wise man gets his wisdom from the kid on the street, and rightly so. She is a talented child, and that is a fact. But perhaps the whole problem is that the interlocutor simply cannot learn the art. If the lady is so dissatisfied, then she is simply afraid. The maiden frowns, asking if the countess is serious. She certainly wants to learn, and there is some sense in that. It is not worth rejecting the lessons by disagreeing. Even if he is not there, the lady would still like to give some kind of gift to her grandson, who will be born very soon, and this would be a great idea. Anyone who doesn't want to study can go home. Turning to Hammy, who has already started the lesson, the woman says that they will simply get tired of waiting for the others. The beauty says that this is nonsense because each of them has a desire to learn something new. It would not be a bad idea. The friend agrees because such an opportunity should not be missed. She would like to make a handkerchief as a gift for her beloved husband. The lady who was indignant just recently changes her mind and agrees to the training. Her face says otherwise, but there is no choice. The most basic stitch to start with is the straight stitch. You can use it to create shapes like triangles and squares. This will be simple, so the brunette hopes for conscientiousness. The next step will be more difficult, and this is a curved stitch for embroidery. With its help, you can create a circle or a wave, and there are also many other types of figures that can be made only using this method. It will be difficult at first, so it is worth drawing a line and following it, but it will be worth it. Later, after washing the product, the line will be erased and will not leave even a trace. There is a noise in the hall because everyone has some questions. Someone asks if she is doing it right. Someone asks why she has a crooked line instead of a straight one, and another girl got her thread tangled. A little embarrassed by these results, Hammy realizes that no matter where he looks, nothing is good. Everything turns out in the worst possible way. Turning to her friends, the maiden asks them to help the guests from the window side. This will help add control of the work. Eni doesn't understand what to do because her friend actually asked them to help teach someone, and it's strange. They are noble ladies and they can't afford such a thing. The same mistress, frowning, mutters under her breath. She also can't believe that this girl asked the maids to teach them how to embroider and do other things. Realizing that the brunette herself is just a maid, this becomes a logical turn of events. Asking to come over, she says that her thread has gotten tangled. Amy corrects that when someone holds the needle, you should hold the thread with your other hand so it doesn't get tangled. After some time, the estate is still noisy, but this time it is joyful. One of the people present is admiring the embroidery, which depicts a butterfly. Nymphera did a beautiful embroidery, and the blue color seems to open the eyes of the beauty. This is definitely a worthy work. It is hard to believe that such embroidery was done on the first try. The friends are talking to each other, because it seems to them that today they have discovered a new wonderful world for themselves. It all comes to an end when 2 ladies approach Winston, thanking him for arranging this tea party and meeting such a wonderful girl who helped with their training and had a nice time with them. Smiling, the man doesn't dare to say anything, but then thanks them in return, because their presence is a great honor for him. He didn't expect everything to be so good. Coming closer, the blonde asks that next time for another such event, they send her an invitation. The others standing behind as one ask for the same thing because they want to attend the classes again. Bowing his head, the red-haired man agrees. They will see each other again later, which means it is time to say goodbye. The young man will later have to tell Hami that they have already left. It was only thanks to this girl that the lady had a wonderful time studying. Without showing it, the viscount thinks that thanks to her, everything ended successfully. After that meeting, all the workers at the estate began to work in a much better environment. The menu became more varied and seasonal fruits appeared. Also, of course, the wages of those hired changed. Things were going up, making everyone happy with such success and reaping the benefits. The most important change was the introduction of official holidays, which had never been anything real. While in the yard, the brunette bends down to smell the beautiful flowers. She has the best intentions in mind, because it's wonderful to get outside, even if only for a little while. Looking up, the girl notices the same paper airplane that she has seen in the sky 3 or 4 times already. It cannot be that the message is following the main character. It looks like the thing is still flying in the same direction as last time. No idea what it's intended for, under any circumstances. Walking further, the beauty seems to follow the flying vehicle, which is heading somewhere to the side as if leading it. Passing by more flowers and bushes, the girl bends down to sniff something again. Unlike the modern times where her grandmother lived, here there is greenery everywhere. Raising her head again, Hammy seemed to be asking the plane a question. It was important for her to know where she was going. If they were going in the same direction, then they could go together. In words that are impossible to understand, the baby lands at his companion's feet. He is really very cute and seems to be all alone in this dark forest. Lifting the hem of her dress, the lady follows him, trying to speed up a little so as not to fall behind. She cannot lose sight of the thing this time either. The airplane seems to feel and hear all the words, so it circles around the head, which causes a slight smile on the lips of the main character. Turning again to the baby, she notes that he is surprisingly beautiful, and on top of all this, is also capable of doing so clearly what is wanted of him. If you remember, he passed through the roof of the residence, but no matter how you look at it, there was no ghost or smoke, so it seemed strange. Turning somewhere to the side without warning at all about its actions, the thing makes the girl gasp. The brunette looks around, frozen. She doesn't quite understand what just happened and why everything changed so abruptly. Approaching the tree, the heroine looks at the trunk, realizing that it could not have just disappeared somewhere. It was not logical, and therefore led to a stupor. As if from nowhere, a figure in a black cloak appears in the distance. It does not move, waiting for him to be free to approach. Realizing that the figure is familiar, it dawns on the grandmother that it is a fortune teller. He turns, greeting the young lady, for they have met as promised. Smiling, the brunette laughs, because the prankster who made the airplane or was him was this young man. This turn was too incomprehensible. Looking up at the thing, the man changes the subject, because it is a glowing bird, not an airplane. Freezing, he asks if the beauty sees him. Not understanding what is being said, the girl says that she sees just like the young man, but the others are not given this ability. The guy chuckled and asked his interlocutor to follow him. Instead of explaining in words, it would be much faster to show. No point in wasting time. Asking what the fortune teller is going to show, the lady expects an answer but is intrigued. Following him, she will see everything herself. Grabbing the airplane, the man squeezes it in his hand so that it doesn't fly away again, saying that this topic is quite important, so it's worth following the advice. The interlocutor asks if the heroine knows about the existence of magic in this world, to which she receives a positive answer. I want to ask even more questions, but my companion remains taciturn until the end of the walk, not giving himself a chance to speak. Stopping, he says that this is where the needed thing or building should be. There is nothing here, but this does not bother anyone. Looking around the clearing, the girl notices that it is a clean and wide space where one can have a picnic or come for lunch. The man asks not to jump to conclusions, but to just take at least one more step, so the lady does just that. Her hair flies in all directions, letting her know she did the right thing. Her eyes widen slightly in shock. Right before your eyes is a huge castle in dark shades. It's not hard to guess why it's here, but it's hard to understand why they're here. Coming up and stopping behind, the boy asks if she is impressed by this sight. It is impossible to believe that it is in vain. Not quite understanding what they were talking about and why they brought her here, the brunette points her finger forward, asking what it is. Waving his hand towards the formation, the magician greets the grandmother in the magic castle, which was discussed at the last meeting. Understanding the meaning of the words, the heroine freezes as if rooted to the spot, trying to say something, straining the muscles of her mouth in vain. Asking again if this is definitely a magical castle, the lady asks if this is a place for individual wizards in this world. Reaching out and taking the palm of his interlocutor, the man confirms her guess, saying that she is a sorceress like everyone else. Hammy frowns, confused, trying to process all the information given to her. She should think more about her powers. The guy is also a wizard. First, they should go to the castle and find out the cute person's affiliation, and then she will receive detailed explanations. Still not understanding what kind of accessory is being discussed, the lady wants to move away, but trips over something under her feet. Asking her to be careful, the guy points to something off to the side. If the brunette has powers, then she sees an oak tree with white roots. If you enter the inner part of the tree, the magic is visible, but if you leave it, it is not. This is the simplest of all that is to come. If in the future there is a need to get into the castle, you can use this indicator. Without it, you can't enter here. The lady stutters and asks if it is true that she is indeed one of the sorceresses, to which she receives a slight nod. She can't do magic and other things at all, but the fortune teller doesn't know that. The fact that the lady sees Alfie's letter only means that the granny's magical power is not so small. Turning away, the girl corrects the rumors because she saw this letter completely by accident and there is no connection. Looking down and gathering her courage, the girl says in one breath that she read the letter without permission. The man freezes in shock and asks if she actually managed to read the letter. Even many mages with sufficient level would not be able to read it. Now everything becomes even more confusing. The Virgin did not even think that the paper would be encrypted somehow because she saw ordinary letters. Claiming that everything is in order, the young man notes that there was nothing particularly important there. They do not feel fear because this incident happened. In reality, Alfie is an amazing person with unique abilities. No one knows how he acquired his talents and where exactly. The man is not very strong in magic, but they still have some similarities. It seems strange, but it is true. The wizard is a very clever fellow. He has a fair amount of theoretical knowledge, so he uses a shrewd type of magic. The guy has only one characteristic flaw that interferes with his work, but more on that later, because the girl is asked to go into the yard. Looking at the stairs and the rest of the gloomy interior, which adds to the fear, it is worth noting that this building is strange. No one would be surprised if it collapsed right now. Worried about his safety, Hemi says that it would be better to move out. But this is where things get much more interesting. In case of destruction, you can ask the mages for restoration, but manual work will also be required. There is nowhere to find a mage restorer, and the payment is too high, as is the rarity of this type. Even more surprised, the lady asks about the rarity, because she did not know about the different types of magic and the magicians themselves. If you go deeper, there are only 509 varieties, but there are also those that are more common than other people in this area. Understanding the terms of this wizard game, the brunette asks what type the friend is then, but he is classified as the most ordinary. His task is to read and show the past and the future. This activity is extremely interesting, but almost everyone can do it for him. Covering her mouth with her hand, the girl still looks surprised. Reading and seeing the future sounds very exciting, but it is a very common gift, so there is nothing important here. Stopping near a door with a huge shining blue ball, the fortune teller suggests trying to enter it. If they both manage to enter there, then both magics would mix, and it would be easy to determine the type of abilities of the young lady. The ball still glows dangerously, emitting strange vibrations that are just trying to push away everyone around, warning that they shouldn't get closer. A surprised voice says that he hasn't seen such waves for a long time. You should close your eyes and hold your breath, because it will be like diving into water. Perhaps this could be equated to something else, but the maiden never has time to ask why she decides to do what is necessary. Freezing, she puts her hands forward in a protective gesture. The sphere approaches almost to the very edge, trying to push the person down. Squeezing her eyes and clutching her ears, the girl holds her breath, thereby humbles herself and does not disappoint the fortune teller who brought her here. The soft circle reaches its designated end and then seems to engulf the brunette, who is already squatting, shrinking more and more in anticipation of the test. A few seconds later, everything ends as suddenly as it began. Adjusting her hair, the girl looks around in confusion. Putting his hand on her shoulder, the man asks if everything is okay. He did not expect such an attack, because usually touching the light with your hand is more than enough. A silver ball now hovers in front of the couple. Here, the grandmother's abilities and distinctive features are determined, but this will not take much time. Now you can identify the magic of the beauty. Everything is finished, so everything is in the public domain, allowing you to get what you want. Showing the ball, the guy comments on the colors and everything else. Granny's magic radiates gray, and it's different for everyone. The girl saw Alfie's letter, and he remembers that the guy had purple and blue colors. Even when separating the magicians, the result and analysis may not be immediate. Reminding one of the most important things, the man asks that the girl never tell anyone where she went and what exactly she saw. The maid will take care of sending the result as soon as everything is ready. After receiving the letter, she can visit the castle as well as at any time, even if she is bored. Turning to the side, the brunette asks if it's true that she can do this, because she doesn't want to make a mistake in anything. Everyone is free to come here whenever they want. Even though it is called a magic castle, only the fortune teller guy stays here for a long time. Not understanding the purpose of this estate, Hami asks where the rest of the inhabitants went. Each of the individuals left on their own personal request for earnings, but the young man had to stay, because he is the owner of the castle, which will be empty without him. A bright dawn falls on the interlocutor. It dawns on him that he has not introduced himself. His name is Kikos Heigl. He is a representative of the magicians and therefore one of the most important. The girl smiles because this moment seems extremely funny and sweet to her. She says her name, telling the already known information that she is a servant in Winston's house. The estate gets a little sunlight, which gives it a bit of charm. The dark paint still looks a bit gloomy, but it's not that bad. The lady was sure that she had spent too much time inside, clearly overstaying her welcome. As if she had entered another world, she could no longer find a reason to leave. It seems that everything turned out for the best, because now she too can come here at any time of the day or night. Even the word magic sounds strange. It's something unfamiliar and not at all from the modern times from which the girl was transported. If you think about it, the maid always dreamed of becoming a master. This was back when she was a child reading about magicians and their different powers. Thoughts are interrupted, as something very close interferes with thoughts. The gaze switches to the fox, sitting 2 steps away from the main character. Frowning, she doesn't understand where the fire fox came from, because that's what the people called it. Crouching down and trying not to scare the animal, the maid calls it closer to her, expecting that her words will have at least a little effect. If you look closely, this fox looks like Cassian. This comparison doesn't sound normal, but there is some similarity. The animal is definitely a boy, and the character is also very similar. Perhaps one day there will be a chance to talk freely with the young master and even tell this story. Without leaving, the girl begins to ask questions, hoping to get answers and find out where the owner is, as well as other details. The answer is inexplicable aggression. The gaze soars into the sky again. The already familiar little plane, but a slightly different color, hangs right overhead, about to land. It seems strange that the young people had only just managed to part ways when the man had already sent a letter, which certainly contained the promised information. Carefully unfolding the folded paper, the girl begins to quickly read between the lines. The message is addressed to Alfie, stating interesting news. Quickly closing everything back, the lady turns away. The thing must fly to its owner. For some reason, all the airplanes always fly to the wrong addressee, and it's annoying. Lifting it up, the girl launches the plane into the sky, hoping that a third time a mistake will definitely not happen, under any circumstances. The only plus of the trip here was the cute fox that she managed to meet. However, when she turned around, the heroine saw only an empty space. Raising her eyebrow, the brunette tries to figure out where the little animal went in such a short time. The little one turned out to be too nimble, but it is worth hoping for a second meeting. Only a couple of days have passed, but the results are already ready, and very soon you will be able to learn about them directly from the horse's mouth. A little nervously, the maiden admits that she hadn't thought about coming here so quickly. She had hoped that it would take longer. At dawn, a small plane flew into the room, announcing that the presence of the lady herself was required to clarify the circumstances. Thanks to her friends, the heroine was able to break out of her work schedule. When she asked who would replace her, she received a unanimous, "I can." The whole journey without a piece of paper that leads to the castle is extremely boring. You just want to turn around and go back to where you had to go. An animal appears from the bushes again, drilling its eyes into the path and looking at the girl who is passing by. Kneeling down next to the fox, the lady joyfully greets the animal, who cuddles up to her hands. This time, the baby turned out to be more accommodating. He does not move away from his new acquaintance, continuing to rub around, actively making some sounds. Crawling a little closer, the brunette tries to talk to her interlocutor. It may seem strange from the outside, but she is extremely interested. No longer hiding her essence, the beauty literally sticks to the legs and dress of the girl. Covering his eyes, he begins to rub his muzzle. The smile fades because the boy is truly left to his own devices. No one is watching him or taking him home. If you think about it, that's another similarity to Cassian. While in the hall with the young master, the maid, doing something, remembers her adventures. Today, when she went outside, she saw a cute animal. Looking down, the boy asks again, as if to clarify whether it was really a fox or someone else. The hand with the needle glides carefully over the fabric, while the heroine embroiders a fox on a white canvas. The occupation was found quite quickly. Smiling, the young man notes that this is a wonderful piece of work. He had no doubt that it would be a fox after his friend's story. Becoming serious, the man asks to be careful, because if he is near the baby, problems may arise, as well as strange things, because this is not an ordinary animal. The boy did say that strange things happen, but it is impossible to take his word for it without solid evidence. Thinking about it, the girl realizes that she can't continue calling the animal by the name fox, because there are still so many beautiful names to choose from. Apparently, the baby agrees, so putting her hand to her face as if thinking, the girl asks what to call him then. One of the options is Sunni. The animal doesn't like the word, so it simply makes an unpleasant and dissatisfied growl, as if showing its disagreement. Next in line is Doll, but the answer from the beast remains the same. He does not agree with anything. He doesn't like anything, and it drives him into a kind of stupor. They are already near the very oak tree where the castle is located. Realizing that it was time to go and that it was impossible to take the fox with her, the girl turned around and said goodbye to her new acquaintance. Blue eyes stare sadly, not even wanting to move from the spot after the beauty asks him to leave. The couple stands frozen and looks at each other. The forest is filled with silence, and only words and sounds are carried slightly through the space. Noticing some movements, Hammy immediately asks where the animal is heading, realizing that it will definitely not give a precise answer. The girl sits down, trying to follow the precise actions, seeing how the fox jumps near the trunk of a beautiful oak tree. Climbing onto the highest branch, which is above the heroine's head, the baby simply lies down, hiding his nose under his own tail. Seeing him turn his back, there is no limit to his indignation. By turning around, the maiden warns that now it is her turn to turn around and just leave. Coming closer to the entrance, the beauty freezes, because the castle still brings strange sensations. It does not feel real. The hand carefully and as slowly as possible reaches for the place that usually replaces the handle. Here, everything opens with the help of sensors. The room has the same dark atmosphere. There is complete darkness everywhere, mixed with silence that presses on the ears. The fortune teller appears out of nowhere, clearly pleased that Granny has arrived. He can't help but be happy that the letter was seen. Kikos comes closer when addressed, but they correct themselves sooner because now he can be called by name. It will be much easier this way and without statuses. The man interrupts his words and says that it is not so important now, thereby driving the girl into a stupor. She looks innocently, blinking her eyes. In full determination, the guy says that something serious has happened, so they should go into another room together. Clutching his interlocutor by the shoulders, Kikos says that he had previously asked not to tell anyone about that analysis of magic for complete safety. The guy also said that after the request for analysis of magic, even a couple of months can pass, thereby delaying the process. However, something strange happened. It was impossible to believe, but in just 3 or 4 days, the desired result arrived in an expanded form. A little embarrassed, the girl asks what this means. She just hopes that there was no mistake and therefore everything is fine. Agreeing with all the words, as if trying to do it faster, the man says that something still went wrong. Everything is in perfect order, but there is one strange detail that raises doubts. Granny's type of magic cannot help but cause shock. Pausing for a few seconds, Kikos finally announces the name. She has a type of consciousness. The confusion is real because it doesn't seem normal. Mages don't have the power of creation because it's almost omnipotence. Putting her hands to her face, in complete despair, the fortune teller says that he has already met such wizards and they can definitely die, thereby ending everything. Switching to a scream, the granny asks to concentrate and finally tell all the details. Creation is the first creation of things that did not exist before. Such a force cannot simply appear out of nowhere. They are the rarest type of mages in all of history, and only a few are known to have fully mastered their powers. This type is even mentioned in legends, which probably all the inhabitants of this castle have already read. It is impossible not to pay attention to the legends about such wizards. As if being carried away to another universe, the beauty still stands, not daring to move from her place. She does not understand what the legends are about and why specifically about her. Changing the subject slightly to better explain the situation and abilities, the mage asks if Hammy has anything she likes to create. There is a whole bunch of choice here, as there are so many factors to create. Reflectively, the lady says that she has favorites. This is not something that was invented by the sorceress because it was created by others. And the girl simply repeated this thing, making it her hobby. The idea comes only to embroidery, knitting, as well as a variety of food in order to treat everyone around and see their joy and pleasure. As if becoming more interested, the magician asks for more specific explanations in order to understand what is what. Putting her hand on her dress, the girl reaches into her pocket, realizing that there will be something more weighty and beautiful for evidence there. In your hands, you find a handkerchief with beautiful embroidery depicting a bright fox running through a field surrounded by flowers. Silently accepting the item, the man asks about cooking, to which he receives a simple answer. The interlocutor prepared day and night tea, thereby earning her title as well as a lot of gratitude. In impatience and also in complete delight, the young man folds his hands and claps them gently. He likes the momentum this business is gaining. Pointing his finger at the item, the man says that he hasn't seen such embroidery since he was born. The situation with the drinks is even worse because this is the first time he's heard about it. All this definitely did not exist before, and Grandma created these things even if she did not suspect it herself. The type of creation is ideal in this case. Smiling, the girl shakes her head again, once again saying that all this was created by other people and it does not depend on her. The beauty obviously speaks of another world, but these two spaces are like heaven and earth. In that world, the maiden was not a magician, but in any case, there were no such things in their state. This definitely looks like something special. Don't underestimate your powers because this is not something that is untrue. Repeating his words and guesses once again, the young man says that this may well relate to the creative type and he cannot be wrong. The brunette asks again if it is really amazing that she creates these things. It doesn't matter at all, because creation is definitely present. Hammy closes her eyes and tries to digest the information she has just received. It is difficult to understand and accept all of this at once, despite the horror. The problems remain real, as there are absolutely no records of this type anywhere, so it will not be possible to study each ability in detail. Both have no idea where to start. Confusion is now the unknown part of this castle because eventually the exact cause will have to be figured out. To begin with, the magician offers to accept a little thing. In front of the girl, there appears some incomprehensible bundle, similar to simple paper with some letters. Her hands are now busy while the beauty tries with all her might to hold the enormous weight that has acquired weight just now. As if reading lips, Kikos explains exactly what is in the printed version. This is the theory of elementary magic for beginner magicians. It is worth trying to practice. Becoming a novice at that age sounds strange, but Grandma has readings to do. She doesn't have any basic knowledge of magic. The gaze switches to the book that is inside the paper. It seems as if the cover is made of gold and silver. That is why it shines so much. Not letting up with her questions, Hammy asks about her deeds. Everything she creates is clearly the result of the magic of creation. The owner shrugs, thinking. No one knows if the creature's magic has anything to do with it. Realizing that this question was not asked without reason, the young man asks if there were any prerequisites that made him think in this way. There is nothing great about it, but somehow it feels like when something is being created, everything goes too smoothly than expected. Suddenly stammering, the maiden suggests to forget this line. She knew that having become younger, her speed as well as her body became much better, so this seemed to be the real reason. Realizing that things won't go this way, the man suggests that she come to him in the future so that he can teach her how to control magic. This knowledge will help in the future. Even if the theory is easy, it doesn't mean that without direct control of magic, everything will turn out exactly as it should. It seems better to trust. The lady works as a maid, so she won't be able to come too often. It doesn't depend on her because she really wants to learn, but there is not always a way. Thinking, the girl says that she will be able to come once a week. This will be more than enough since the granny still could, and there is no need to overexert herself with magic. Regular training usually starts at age 17. This applies to everyone, including academy students. The contract remains for the days when Hammy is free. Almost agreeing, the guy puts forward another condition. The girl had better keep all this a secret from others, otherwise it could be worse. Magicians are not required to maintain secrecy with family or other people, but they should never reveal their type. Not quite understanding why there is such a fuss around her creative power, the maiden quietly agrees to such a deal. If anyone finds out the details, questions may arise, and then difficulties for all the magicians in the well-known castle. Nodding in response, the girl understands the whole situation without further explanation. I don't want to steal attention and pretend that she needs repetition. There was no point in even focusing on this, since the lady had never planned to discuss this situation with anyone in her circle. She should simply take the books from the estate and start reading them today. Again agreeing with everything she was told, the brunette asks if she can leave. She was suddenly replaced by the duty officers, so she should leave. Nodding in agreement, the man says that he is not ready to teach anything today either. Each lesson will require its own preparation. The conversation is over. And now, being outside, the heroine can take a deep breath and think through her plans for the coming week in more detail. Before she could say anything to herself, the beauty was distracted by something very close by. The lady gasps in surprise when she sees the fox, who has just woken up. She can't believe that the little animal waited for her for almost an hour and didn't even run away. Coming closer to the pet, the maiden praises and thanks the animal. She really did not expect it, and so such a small thing made her smile. Looking down at the books again, the heroine notices that there is much that is interesting. The study of magic begins with the title, Magic Theory for Beginners, Development of Magic, Understanding Magicians. Becoming a mage would require a lot of work and effort. It would be nice to be able to hide it and do everything in the best possible way, but she doesn't have that knowledge right now. The types of magicians are divided into different types, but there are only two main ones. The physical type is the magic that manifests in real things, and the formless type means that the magic does not manifest. Flame control is a specification, and restoration is a restoration class, and all of them are physical types. On the other hand, the book did not say whether insight had anything to do with reality. This gift belongs to spiritual, formless magic. Below the text on one of the pages is a table that indicates what the 509 different types of magic belong to, and it is to this that the main character draws attention. If you look closely, this book is not at all for beginners. Virgos don't understand almost anything, so the theory becomes a problem. The brunette looks away sadly, looking up from her reading. This way, things definitely won't go too far because the heroine doesn't have enough practice. Putting the book down somewhere near her, the lady takes up another copy. It's worth trying to read at least a few pages. Next up is The Development of Magic. This one goes into more detail, and it seems like it's only going to get worse with each new page. Magic is a force in the body of a wizard that cannot be controlled. It all starts with extraction and subjugation. To get used to it, you need to enter into awareness, not rejection of forces. It all depends on the type, because the amount of power depends on each type. Such properties are a unique energy that is given to people. The last line is the one that evokes the most negative emotions, because it says that there is no universal way to master the gift. Things will definitely not go well that way. Turning away and putting the book aside, the girl wonders what to do next. Everything is written too complicatedly and uninterestingly for her. The cover catches the eye. Something is written on it, while a letter from Alfie pops into my head, which spoke of many important things. Someone seemed to say that the young man had written many academic books, which meant he could be of some help. The easiest way would be to simply look through the dictionaries and all their contents. The words you need should be there. Someone is knocking on the door. The sound fills the entire room, remaining insistent, so that the person standing behind the door will definitely not be ignored and let in. Bursting into the room like a small whirlwind, the maid, holding a box in her hands, announces that some kind of parcel has arrived. Freezing and then turning around, the beauty only blinks her eyes. She did not expect strange behavior, and especially not a new thing. The wrapping paper says that this package is from Janelle's. Amy can't believe that this is the same boutique. Everything becomes clear because this is definitely some kind of dress. Smiling, the blonde says that she would like to look at the model and style, as well as the fabric on the girl's figure. Looking at the beautiful pattern again, the brunette looks away in confusion. She remembers that she definitely didn't order the clothes, so this must be a mistake. Almost begging, the surrounding friends start making puppy eyes, because they all can't wait to look at the dress that was sent. One of the most impatient ones almost pushes her friend, because she doesn't want to wait a few more days until she decides to try it on. Frowning, Hammy again expresses her uncertainty. She really doesn't even know why this happened and how she should accept the gift. Deciding on the main step, so as not to make anyone wait, the girl carefully places the parcel on the table and then opens the lid. There is a small paper on top that says that Madame Janelle hopes that this model will not have to be corrected like the last one. All doubts disappear, since it is definitely addressed to the maid. Not quite understanding why this is considered offensive, the girl puts the letter aside. Amy is pulled out of her thoughts when she looks inside and sees the contents. It looks absolutely beautiful. The parcel contains a beautiful dress made of white fabric, as well as several other fabrics and accessories. Eni also gives in and looks in right there, groaning because there are even shoes there. The other girl just looks away silently because she is jealous. Without thinking about delaying, the friend, almost jumping, begs the beauty to try everything on right now. Embarrassed by such requests, not understanding why she couldn't postpone the fitting until later, Hammy frowned a little, saying nothing. Amy agrees with her friend because it is incredibly beautiful, and she is sure that this thing would be perfect for a maid. There is nothing to be done because to refuse when so many people are almost begging to do such an easy thing is indecent. Full of determination, the brunette promises that they will make a beauty out of her friend, and all she has to do is trust them. If you want to do everything perfectly, then you should start with the hair. Everyone should carry the accessories they have to complete the look. Without saying a word, the grandmother still holds the box. She is not going anywhere, which means all this is unnecessary. But it is impossible to argue with friends. 15 minutes later, the girl is wearing a wonderful snow-white dress. The sleeves are made in a beautiful style with fluffy edges, emphasizing the blue belt and bow on the neck. Those in the room unanimously ask to look in the mirror because the dark frills below are also wonderfully executed. My reflection makes me want to scream and jump for joy. A strange but pleasant feeling fills my body. This image is the new Hami, who is very pleased with the work she has done. Smiling again, the blonde immediately, without praise, confirms her friend's words because they really were afraid, and everything turned out perfectly. According to other girls, if there was a nymph in the forest, she would have exactly this image. In this case, the friend must have a wreath on her head. Brilliant ideas don't come right away, but it's worth trying to ask the gardener for some flowers, and so right now, several maids will go to the garden. Hammy thought she had almost been spared, but she was approached with the same request. She should go with the others. It's warm and sunny outside as usual. It's about midday now, so the heat makes it hard to move around, but summer is coming to an end, and things are better now. 3 girls who agreed to go out into the garden are at different sides of the path, trying to pick as many beautiful flowers as possible. Hammy looks at this picture with a smile. The friends don't want anything to go wrong, so they try their best to make themselves incredibly cute. From the side, someone's voice calls out to the beauty, who, it would seem, does not hear anything. Turning, her gaze stumbles upon Cassian, who is standing a meter away from his acquaintance. The red-haired man can't say a word, so after what he said, he just stares silently, studying everything around him with his eyes and trying to avoid shame. Asking again what he wants, the brunette does not receive any answer. Her gaze is focused somewhere in the area of the dress, and therefore her brain does not react to anything. Already feeling slightly uneasy, the lady asks what happened that made him suddenly not want to talk to her. Not daring to say another word after the remark that everything was fine, Cassian does not understand why he was so confused, and his cheeks had already turned pink. Without looking away from his contemplation, the young man cannot help but notice how beautiful and pretty the lady is. Words are just itching to fly out of her mouth, but he shouldn't do that. Standing opposite each other, the couple looks at each other. As if stating facts, the gentleman talks about new clothes as well as a change in hairstyle. Not considering it necessary to say any compliments, the guy only says that the brunette's new image suits her very well. The boy is clearly thinking about something, and it is something important. His eyes no longer dart from side to side because there is determination in them. Without realizing what he's doing, Winston Jr. takes small steps toward the figure opposite him. They're barely noticeable, but they have their own meaning. He is just a step away from the beauty who looks into his face, trying to understand what is wrong and why he is behaving so strangely. By calling his name again, the girl seemed to be trying to reach out to the man, and perhaps it would not have had any effect if Annie had not called Hammy. Not noticing the slight confusion on her interlocutor's face, the maid points to the wreath her friend had made. It really was simply wonderful. Distracted from his state, the red-haired man nods to the others in the garden, saying that a person is being called. She should go to the others. Almost stutters as he tries to say the stable. He was about to say reading, but he corrects himself because he needs to examine the horse. Without waiting for an answer or any kind of farewell, the guy turns around and quickly walks off somewhere in his own direction. Perplexed, thinking about such peculiar behavior of her friend, the brunette understands that the gentleman is most likely just too busy. This is considered almost an escape, but the young man doesn't care at all. He doesn't understand how embarrassed he had to be to behave like that. Lowering his head and studying the path under his feet, the red-haired man realizes that he almost decided to hug Hammy, despite the fact that he was able to restrain himself. In the palace, as usual, the sun shines brightly through the curtains, which have long been pulled back. The teacher asks the girl about the young gentleman. It seems that something happened to him, but even the brunette herself cannot give a precise answer. Listening to the speech about how nothing is known, Blake notes to himself that the maid looks as usual and has not even changed a bit or been nervous. Delving into a topic in class, the blonde guy talks about the academy students who hide their status, breaking the stereotypes of existing factions. The remark only elicits a heavy sigh. Calling out to the young viscount, the teacher tries to get through to him. It seems that the boy does not listen to the essence of the lesson at all, not under any pretext. Even to all these manipulations, there is no answer. Another exit escapes from the guy's lips while the man closes the book, realizing that there will be no lesson. He wonders what is bothering Winston, but he says that no one knows, and perhaps not even he himself, because it is too complex a question. For some reason, he thinks too often about one incident, as well as other moments. It is not worth taking it into your head or giving words any meaning. Falling silent and lost in his thoughts for a bit, Blake realizes that this probably has something to do with his close friend, who doesn't suspect anything. The forest is filled with the wonderful aroma of leaves and fresh air, which seems to clog the nostrils and wants to break through. Lying on the blanket, the brunette talks about a fortune teller who, as soon as she saw the girl, said that she was a granny, and she didn't even need time to think. The fox sitting nearby makes some kind of sound, as if agreeing with the words spoken to the owner of the castle, whom he does not even know. It is extremely surprising that Kikos, without even looking, immediately learned the most terrible secret from the lady's life. You can immediately say that he is a real magician, not a charlatan. Such people are usually called prophetic vision magicians. That is why the man knew about all the memories of the beauty without thinking about it. Already about to say that Hammy, like the young fortune teller, is part of this castle and from history, she interrupts. From the side, an incomprehensible quiet sound is heard, which seems to ask what is wrong. Leaning back onto the mat, the brunette waves her arms. She definitely won't be a wizard, and there's no way to fix that. Kiko said that he never says his type, but she really wants to share her experiences with at least someone around her. It still doesn't work out that I can tell everything right now as it is. I'll have to wait until I go to the castle and then ask Kikos if he can talk. Suddenly deciding to change her mind, the maiden kneels. Perhaps an even better choice would be to simply take the fox with her to the estate for training. Smiling, she assures that the little animal cannot fail to please the fortune teller, especially if the owner introduces the two of them together. The animal, as if understanding what was being discussed but not trying to say anything, moves back somewhere, showing its dissatisfaction with the situation. Frowning, already in a frustrated voice, the lady agrees. If the baby doesn't want to, then today she will have to go alone and stay there for a while. The fox cub lies down on the grass, making another plaintive sound. Trying to calm her pet, the heroine promises that she will be back very soon so she won't have to wait long. A lecture on magic, which was promised to be held a few days ago, is already in full swing in the palace. But due to Hammy's busy schedule, everything did not go according to plan. The type of magic and its kind are individual for each, but also have a great difference. This is the whole essence of what is happening in each wizard. It turns out that there is no exact way or method of mastering it, so everyone learns everything on their own along their own laid path. Frowning and looking at the floor, the girl again speaks as if to herself. She has absolutely no idea how to make this better. Throwing up his hands in disappointment, the young man says that he can't help in any way. He would really like to, but he doesn't know the magic of creation at all. There are almost no records of the existing types from the legends in any books or manuscripts. This creates even more problems. All this information, or rather the lack of it, only tells you that you should keep trying, or nothing will work. Of course, it simplifies the task that you should only try something based on knowledge of other types of magic. Otherwise, it would be completely unrealistic to master even the basics. Asking again in surprise, the brunette tries to believe the words spoken. On average, there are 500 types, so over time, after gradual testing, everything should definitely work out. Trying to somehow cheer up his friend, Kikos asks, "Not to worry about this. If you don't stop, everything will gradually happen." Deciding to take this step because there is no choice left, the girl, closing her eyes, says that she trusts Kikos, which means they can begin. The first in line will be the magic of prophetic foresight. These are the very basics, but at the same time, such an activity will certainly not be easy. There are only 2 small figures in the room. They are surrounded by colorful carpets and candles that illuminate their faces. In order to master the magic of prophetic foresight, it is necessary first of all to think arrogantly, and this will help the matter. Everything turns out to be much simpler than expected. You just need to think in such a way that you know absolutely everything about a person, even what he will do tomorrow. In this way, magic will yield perfectly. It is hard to believe that magic can be controlled in this way. However, this is only the basis, and the real essence begins from this very moment. It seems that the training will indeed be very difficult and at the same time long. However, relying on her own strength, Hammy knows that she can handle it. Kikos lights some kind of fire, noting that he has long been an experienced magician and has long since passed this initial stage, but now he will show it again. A lump of magic is formed on the palm, inside which is the target of this person. Everything is as easy as pie. It is best if the target is near or in contact with a person who is engaged in such things. In the enchanted eyes, a light flickers, which comes from a small lump. If you think about dividing an object into two parts, then one part will be an image of the present, and the other, the opposite. Looking at things separately, everything is learned in a natural way. Asking a stupid question, the brunette asks about what exactly should be known, but she is immediately answered about the future and the past. The offer to finish comes out of nowhere. The man has just managed to see a little bit of Granny's future, even though he had no intention of doing so. Repeating the memorized material once again, the beauty seems to be trying not to make a mistake with some little thing. With experience, it will be possible to divide into 3 parts already with a real person. Again, trying to find out more, the lady asks how it is done, because she wants to know in advance how to handle something. 3 parts can be seen simultaneously, but if we talk about stages, the sequence would be position, attention, connection, sphere, separation, layers, perception. Standing up and about to leave, the girl lowers her head. It seems too difficult, but Kikos has seen Granny's future, and that alone is worth staying. It was at that moment that it was shown how Hammy coped and did something absolutely amazing, which means everything went exactly according to plan. The guarantee always remains real, because from this moment it is worth studying magic diligently. Turning, the beauty begins to repeat the chain of sequence out loud. The guy corrects his interlocutor a little, trying not to interfere, but at the same time not to do anything bad. This time she promises to try better. No more than 10 minutes pass, but even during this time the beauty's patience runs out. Nothing works, only interfering with the process. Chuckling, the boy claims that everything is fine, because if it had worked the first time, it would have been much weirder, so everything is fine. Alfie knows the relationships between different types of magic better, so a crazy idea appears in his head to change everything around and use his help. It would have been better to ask a friend about it, but no one had ever met a boy who remained so secretive. The fox was impossible to catch even with a trap. The boy catches himself and laughs, talking about 2 people at once, but then asks to forget his strange remarks, because they are just thoughts out loud. Waving his hand, he asks not to pay attention, because besides this, there is something else more interesting at the moment. Not understanding what exactly the brunette should say, she suddenly remembers that she wanted to ask something, and it is worth doing right now. Asking about her type, the lady does not know whether she can tell animals about it. Not far from here, she met a beautiful fox, so she has to ask. Thinking again, the man says that it doesn't matter at all because it's just a fox. Exhaling, the maiden rejoices because this is a huge relief. She changes the subject, asking about how to create glowing letters. Surprisingly, this skill turns out to be one of the easiest. The guy can demonstrate the creation right now and even in practice. Turning around to find some paper, Kikos mentions that he just happens to have a letter he made to send to Alfie today. Going outside, the couple plans to do what they have planned now. Surprisingly, it is easier than expected and matches the teacher's words. All you have to do is gather all the magic on your fingertips and then write a letter by hand. Your finger slides across the paper, leaving traces. Once the text is complete, you need to assemble the square into the exact shape you need to make a full-fledged airplane for launching. Such a letter is naturally not visible to those who have less magical power than the sender. The recipient will see it regardless of his power, because the paper is addressed to him. Asking the beauty to send a message, the man suggests trying to do it together so that the letter finds its owner. Nodding her head, the girl raises her hand and then launches the folded plane into the air, causing it to instantly take off. Flying past the white oak, it freezes right above the fox, who had been sleeping peacefully all this time, waiting for his owner, who promised to return very soon. The paper, bending lower and lower, lands on the head of the baby, who never showed any sign of concern, as if he didn't care. The girl snorts and says that some strange mistake must have occurred, or perhaps the letter flew in the wrong direction. Refusing to believe this, the guy started to sort things out, but suddenly asked if the girl had asked permission to tell about the power to this particular fox. Not understanding what was being said, the beauty only nods slowly and then turns to the white oak tree, where the same pet was still located. Approaching the baby, the magician calls out his name, calling him none other than Alfie, to which he receives a slow and leisurely reaction. The eyes widen as the heroine watches the picture. She can't believe that it was Alfie who tried to escape just recently. Without further ceremony, the young man pokes the fox in the back with his finger, asking him to get up because he has been exposed. Repeating the name over and over again, the young man asks him to finally say at least a word, not just strange sounds, as if he really had become an animal. Blue eyes look clearly at the rest of those present, who have gathered around the tree, examining their new acquaintance. The fortune teller silently looks at the beast, as if expecting to hear a logical answer to all this happening, despite the fact that it is literally impossible to explain. Pretending to be innocent, the kid turns away and averts his eyes. It's immediately clear to everyone who is lying and why. Already getting ready to run away, the guy seems to hope that he will be able to quickly jump off the branch, thereby saving his little skin and life from interrogation. A strong hand grabs the paw of the beast, who clearly did not expect this. He tries to wriggle away, but this is definitely not going to happen, and certainly not this time. Grinning, the young man says through clenched teeth how glad he is that they were finally able to meet after such a long time of ignorance. Interfering in the conversation between the two, the girl asks why so abruptly, and why try to make things worse for Alfie, who obviously had his own special reasons. While looking around the scene, Hammy wanted to add something else, but she was interrupted by a curse that looked quite cute, causing a slight smile. Already completely freeing herself and moving away, the fox snorts resentfully, saying that she simply did not want to catch the fortune teller's eye. Covering his mouth with his hand, the man tries to find the right words in surprise. It turns out that Alfie has transformation magic, while the magician believed that he belongs to the insight type. Turning away, the young man makes innocent eyes, declaring that he has never given reason to think in this way, because he has different abilities. Pointing his finger forward, Kikos accuses the fox of deception, since it was extremely difficult to find him, but he retorts, reminding him that he never asked to be found.